works is a substance of faith, and it's like living faith, dead faith. I think it's
I
how.
think Galatians has a better understanding of what you're trying to get to.
Yeah, but yeah, I'm gonna read more and do more. It's just I try to be accurate where it doesn't uh uh discard what the whole word of God says too. I try to be accurate. I try. You know I this whole faith against works, and this, like, from years ago they wanted to disparage works. They want to disparage uh, grace, and it's like
Galatians is the complete argument. Galatians is basically explains what Christianity is. So many words.
yeah, I'm gonna have to go look into it. So maybe
Yeah, check it out. Paul makes a very clear distinction between faith and works. He said it's either of faith or it's either of works. Can't be both. Because if it's of works, then it is no longer a faith because it's based on merit, right? And you gotta work your way to heaven, which has been shown in the past. We can't do that. We've all fallen short and come short of the glory of God, right?
yeah.
So yeah, so some people try to mix them together like you have to have both. No, it would be nice to have both, absolutely. Like show your faith by your works. I think people would definitely believe what you're saying more if you were to practice what you preach, so to speak. But you can't tell me if there's a God that's not out there doing the works, but he does believe on God, and that's between him and God. Only he would know that. That that man is no more condemned than the one who is doing the works. Right? They're both safe.
What was it again? Galatians what? Galatians what again?
You can start at Galatians. You can start at Galatians 3.
Oh, Galatians 3. Yeah, I like how, because I think if we just take that verse and be like, let's just simply look at it and say, okay, it's either this or this, and
You can't read the Bible per verse. You got to read it as a whole story, as a whole book.
Yeah, that's what
You're
I'm
not clearly trying to encompass the whole,
Yeah,
you read it per line.
Yeah, because I don't. I just don't like this whole. They try to be like, oh, like it. It's they want to disparage against works.
Can have justified true beliefs, then what is the purpose of you even, interrogating a Christian to begin with? Because what have you accomplished at the very end? Because you can't even have justification that you even accomplished anything that led to truth or anything of that nature. And I just found that was self-defeating, and I did not know that until someone in the other chat actually said that, and I was kind of surprised.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing, Matt. There's a lot of positions atheists take up that I think they're taking up unnecessarily. Like, for example, it's one thing to say, you know what, I don't believe in God, I don't see evidence, I'm not convinced, whatever, and sort of that's that. There's not much else they have to do. But when atheists tend to then take up the position of trying to disprove God, I don't think that bodes well for them. Because why?
very problematic when they start, focusing on going after Christians or trying to say that morality is somehow objective, and or even make moral arguments whether subjective or not, because it just seems like to me, look, if
I done paid for my sins, right? You paid my sin debt. I trusted that.
That's the only real way that I see to salvage it, I guess.
Well, walk with me for like 30 quick seconds, right? Because again, if that is the concept that we're dealing with eternity, everything that we're talking about and making reference to has to deal with creation. There's only one being, for at least for the sake of this conversation, that exists in non-creation. So we're trying to fathom non-creation. We're already, kind of doing ourselves a disservice. But still, in that non-creation, according to biblical text, God is love in that non-creation. So again, it kind of circles back in on itself.
Specifically agape.
Right.
And if agape requires some kind of sacrifice, what is the sacrifice?
Right, exactly. That's the point. It's to make sense of the concept. It's not to question whether or not it was or wasn't there. It's claimed to be there or not there. The point is, if, as you're saying, Will, it's there in the state where only God exists, right? How can you make sense of it, given that presumably there's nothing to expand in order for the love to be exerted, except God or some aspect of God, if you want to appeal to the Trinity?
Yeah, I had mentioned that in the previous rooms, 2 rooms, in fact, with regard to Christ being eternally begotten from the Father. And so there is that sense of family. God is Elohim, as Oliver said, and there's a plurality. And so within that plurality, within the 3 persons, there is consideration for the interests, for example, of the Son, right, and to the Father and to the Holy Spirit. And so there is this internal system, if you want to call it that, to where there is a reciprocation and consideration.
Yeah, within the triune nature of God, there is this idea of participation, right? The giving and the receiving, the working together. And so, if God is, which is, that's, I guess, can be a debate, but if God exists, prior to creation, the participation with Father, Son, and Spirit is this aspect of agape. Furthermore, I would say, like, where are we getting our definition of agape? Because even though, especially the Greek text, it talks about 3 different types of love. Those can be nuanced in a lot of different ways, and a lot of times they can actually mean the same thing. We draw the line of distinction and say, well, this is what this means and this is what that means. But I think it's in John chapter 20 we can see that they're actually used interchangeably. It's kind of like the Hebrew word nefesh that speaks about the soul, and the word
Neshama?
Yeah, well, not the Shema, but the word soul and nefesh, and then like this and the spirit,
The Ruach.
Ruach, yeah. So there's nowhere in Hebrew scripture where we see this distinction. They're used interchangeably. So I think we have to. So I guess the question then becomes like, where are we getting or arriving at a clear definition of agape that it strictly means, self-giving?
I'm not going to be able to provide that. I'm not biblically literate or whatever, but just if nobody else is going to sort of give the account, I think that regardless of like there being different senses, is it not true that there is such a sense as Tom described or as John described that is ascribed to God? Because that seems sort of what is important for the argument to land. Like, is it sort of understood by Christians that whatever other 3, 4, 5, or million different senses of love God has, that there's at least one that is this self-sacrificial thing.
Can we just use 1 Corinthians 13 to describe agape?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, if someone doesn't take agape to mean self-sacrificing, or if they don't take God to mean, three persons, or we can choose any of the vocabulary, then the argument just doesn't apply to that person. But the argument was directed towards Matt Adams, and I think, and that's how he takes agape to be. So that's what the argument, that's what the definitions are coming from an argument that's already happened. Just to give you some context.
Gotcha.
So if you don't take agape to mean self-sacrificing, then yeah, there's really, you're not going to have much of a bind.
Well, I think what Olive. Oh, go ahead. So.
I was just going to say that I absolutely do take agape to mean self-sacrificing, because the term agape means unconditional love of God. And for me, the term love means to give at one's own expense. So the very nature of God is to continually, without end, give at its own expense. Whatever that that entity itself, the very essence of it is to continually give in that way.
Yeah, but that's a question.
That's how I look at it too.
So prior to creation, that is prior to the heavenly realm or earthly realm, there's but the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, God Himself, and you're going to say that the highest form of love is present in some way, is being expressed. And the question is, what is being sacrificed in that state where it is just the Father, Son, Spirit?
Well, I think that would be to assume that God has a beginning. And if we're dealing with an entity that has no beginning, then that assumption cannot be made.
Okay, there's no assumption about God beginning at all. It's just there's agape love being expressed prior to creation. And now what is being sacrificed?
If I may, real quick, question, Daniel, would you agree that for like any like unity to create something, that it's first dividing a portion of itself from itself?
No, I have no idea what that means.
Right. So anytime a unity creates something, whether we're talking about man and woman, or cells dividing, or whatever, what's physically happening. I'm persuaded that the physical just reflects the spiritual, since this all goes back to that ethereal conversation. Anytime that a unity creates something, it is first dividing a portion from itself.
It's kind of sounding like partialism, what you're talking
If
about.
God is continually creating, if God is ever lasting, ever continually creating, then there is no beginning to that process if it's eternally creating.
Yeah, but then that would just mean that the creation is exists co-eternally with God, right? So you would say that that's your opinion? Is that creation has existed co-eternally with God?
Are we saying creation as in like the things that are created, or the act of creating? Like, do you get what I'm saying? Like, I'm trying to understand that. Because if the act of creating is that, sure, but that doesn't make that God. That's the thing that God created, right? And to get to the point that I'm kind of trying to land on, if we're talking about this thing that is coming from this nothingness into something, the point that I'm making is that, again, for any unity to create something, it's dividing from itself a portion of itself. And the first thing in the biblical, I understand that comes from that is the Son. So there's already like a sacrifice to even come into existence, quote unquote. I use that word sacrifice very colloquially, but like that's what happens when things are birthed, period. Like there's no way to get around that. You must divide from yourself to give from yourself.
Are you talking about like spirit being born from spirit, something like that?
I'm not. I try not to put my own opinion on it too much, but yeah. Go ahead.
Is anybody understanding this? Because this just sounds like gobbledygook to me.
I'll be quiet. Sorry.
No, I just don't understand anything that's being said.
Well, my understanding is that the argument that was being made is that if there was no creation, then how could God have been self-sacrificing? If there was no creation, what was there to self-sacrifice? But I think that through discussing, we're proposing the idea that because God is eternal, then there is no beginning to that which he is the creator, which is ever creating. So there is no beginning point to say that before he started creating. So the argument is that if there was nothing created, then how could he be self-sacrificing? But the counter argument is there ever a time that God started creating or it has no beginning or end? So the very essence of that, which is God, is to continually be creating.
I mean, my understanding of sacrifice is yes, at the expense. I agree with how you worded it, but it doesn't necessarily have to be of substance or essence. In other words, I was trying to tell them earlier, we give a sacrifice of praise. So what are we giving up? We're magnifying the Lord, right? We're worshiping God, right? And so in that sense, what are we magnifying? We're not making God bigger. He's already God. And so what we're doing is the consideration that we do is we're making God bigger than us in a sense of consideration. And that's how I understand where the sacrifice that we do is we're at the expense of the consideration of ourselves. We are magnifying God.
How can you possibly magnify or make bigger an infinite deity?
Yeah, hold on a sec, Brenda. The whole point here is that the sacrifice is Christ on the cross.
I would reject that.
So anything you say that God gave his son, that's the sacrifice. Now, anything you say about God's sacrifice, John, stop. Anything you say that God is sacrificing is just going to diminish the atonement, Christ on the cross.
Well,
that's what's meant when we say that.
What does God sacrifice? What does he currently lack?
Nothing.
Yeah, nothing.
Yeah, so prior to creation, there was no sacrifice, therefore there was no agape, and agape is the highest form of love. If the highest form of love is not present, then God is lacking prior to creation. And that's the problem you're in.
What he's trying to say is that...
Guys, real quick, I think, and I know you guys said you talked about it earlier, but according to the text, Daniel just with love, that's not what it's saying. It doesn't say that. It literally says the Lamb was slain before the foundation of, in the Greek word there's cosmos. It's going to be before creation. So
no, that's prior to the earthly realm. It doesn't mean it's prior to the heavenly realm.
The cosmos is creation.
Yeah, the cosmos
would be under the set of creation, but we're talking before creation.
Right, but
Will is establishing that there was sacrifice prior to the it being in time.
Revelation 13:8. Yeah, B theory of time again. That's what he's saying.
Yeah, B theory of time. Here we go.
Wait, so you don't think that the heavenly realm exists in some kind of temporal way? In that Lucifer then rebelled against God, that there was actions taking place? Like, are you being serious right now? What do you think Lucifer was doing? Of course there was a temporal notion of temporality prior to the foundations of the earth. There was a heavenly realm. In fact, there are two heavenly realms. And the idea is that, there are notions of temporality in that in that realm. I'm talking about prior to all creation, sans creation, God possessing the attribute of agape love, which is the highest form of love, without a sacrifice. And now that would just mean that God does not possess or express the highest form of love prior to creation, which means that God is lacking prior to creation. It's a very simple problem.
Yeah, if it's helpful to frame it in a different way, just think like if there's another possible world, right, where God has all the same qualities of God, but instead of creating anything, before Lucifer, before any of the angels, before Earth, he's just like, no, this is fine. This is great, actually. I like this very much, and doesn't create anything. Does the God in that alternate possible universe have agape love? Does they have that quality?
Has it been established that agape love requires self-sacrifice?
Well, that's what
Yeah,
John
he
thinks,
agreed.
and that's what Matt thinks. So
I
it's
think that's
just
kind of what
their
the question
working
turns
concept.
on.
I would push
It's
back
just
on
like
that.
it's just their working concept of agape love.
Yeah, but a lot of Christians would just say that like the Trinity is like an expression of God's love before creation. Like there's some kind of like eternal like
No,
love
but that's
between.
yeah.
Right.
They would say that. They would say that was before creation. The Trinity interpersonally loved each other, but are you saying that they were maximally loving each other? Because to maximally love each other, the highest form of love is agape love. And if you think that agape love necessitates a sacrifice, well, then what was sacrificed to reach agape love amongst the person?
Yeah, I reject greatest and maximum being synonymous.
It seems like
So
an easy
one of the
chapter for Christians to
qualities,
get out of. They could just
one
deny
of the
either of those.
qualities
Yeah,
of
and the
God's
argument wouldn't
sovereignty.
apply to that,
Without
obviously.
without
If they think
creation,
God is,
you're saying that
if they think God is a slug, then yeah, they'd be out of it too.
But this is directed at
one of
people who like this is like tailored to people whose concepts are in accord with like.
yeah. Now there are many types of love, Tom. Greatest type of love, right? Then you have one type where you have the maximum and minimum within that one type, and so they're not synonymous as well. I was trying to.
I mean, regardless,
Maybe the greatest love you could show a human being.
regardless what scale you want to give it or whatever. I mean, the argument lands as problematic, at least in my view, as soon as you accept that conception of agape love as the Christians that Tom was attacking. That concept, if it lacks, even if it's not the maximal amount of love, just plainly establishes that God is not all loving or doesn't possess all the virtues of love. For instance, he's not like maximally magnanimous. If he lacks like just certain kinds of love, that equally establishes. Also, when it comes to the exception, the objection about guys were talking about creation always happening, and therefore it's not clear that there's a time before creation or something like that. If I understood that correctly, I mean that I guess that's a nice thought, but I don't understand how that could be established if you understand creation to be something that starts and ends, as in.
Will made a distinction between creating and creation. So to always be creating, and then the symbiotic nature of if Christians believe that God is three, then already there's a symbiotic a relationship that is happening for all three to be considered at one time. So there's already this symbiotic, especially because they believe that it's three persons of the Trinity. So
being three persons aside, right? Like what I was trying to point to is that it's the concept, whether you want to see it as creation or creating, right? I'm not sure what that distinction is supposed to achieve, but the point is that the concept of, I guess, in my view, either creation or creating implies an absence of things prior to the creation. That's just like what it means. It's not, unless you have like some generally totally different understanding of the word.
So
it's not. I
let
don't
me
see
ask you a
it's
question.
really debatable.
Let me ask you a question. If God is sovereign, then how can God exercise His sovereignty before creation?
Sorry.
In other words, does it even make sense to talk about? Does it even make sense to talk about agape? Right, like you're talking about proper qualities that are contingent that express themselves
Yeah, but
on
I
creation.
think this keeps going back to assuming that there's this beginning place where this begins. But if this is a never-ending process, then that assumption cannot be made.
Yeah, but the point is that the assumption is made exactly because it's considered creation. Now, if you want to see it as some totally atemporal thing or like eternal thing, then it's just not creation in any sense of the word that anybody understands normally, right? Because nobody understands creation, something that happens without something not being there or some deliberation or something like that.
Yeah, and there's another caller who said that he referenced Revelation 13:8, which was that it was known to God that at the foundation of the world, before creation, that him in his knowledge of where it starts and where it ends, he knew that the Lamb would be slain. So there is the fact that there is that knowledge present before creation, I think demonstrates the agape love.
Not before the foundations of the world. Not prior to not prior to the heavenly realm. That's the point. When it's just God Himself, sans creation, nothing but the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, right? The eternally begotten from the Father, the Spirit proceeds from the Father and the Son. There's just a mere Godhead. That's it. That's all that there is. Where is the sacrifice? And we've been asking this.
Yeah, I don't understand
like
why you
hours.
would sacrifice, because in a family, like let's make this a physical family, right? Like we have a dad, we have a child, and we have the Holy Spirit, which is really let's make the Holy Spirit the mom, just for this sake of argument. So we have this family. In order for this family to flow in a symbiotic way, then the father has to be in agreement with the mother and the child, and they have to coexist in a way that is symbiotic with each other, and that takes love. So in a physical sense, the mom wants to do one thing, but it's not in agreement with the father and what the son wants to do, and they constantly have to be flowing in this symbiotic state to be in one accord. That's the essence of love.
Analogy.
That's actually what we're trying to do here on earth with one another, is to walk in a state where we can be one-minded, one-spirited, one-hearted, that we're not acting in opposition to each other.
But the analogy sort of betrays. I'm saying that the analogy sort of betrays something about the nature of the Trinity, presumably, and what families are, right? Because like the point, I get what like you're trying to do with the analogy as a normal family, like this unit of like different parts, in order to like sort of exist harmoniously, has to like sacrifice things in order to like appease the other and stuff like that. But normal families aren't taken to be one person, as the Trinity is, right? So, basically, I think to get around what Tom is saying, you need some sort of account as to how it could be possible for one agent, one person, right, to be in such dissonance with its different aspects that it needs to sacrifice to itself, or something like that.
But I think, Young, that is the part of us evolving to the next consciousness where we are actually symbiotic with one another in that way.
Now that may be true, but like it still isn't the case that we are that we are like maybe whatever you mean, I guess, by that. If we come to the state where like humanity becomes one big trinity, then that could be like an analogy. But the point is that for the agape thing, you just need, it just sort of seems weird for a person or an agent to have to sacrifice things to itself to appease like these dissonances within itself, right? That's
And
sort
that's
of where
where
the difference.
no, that's not the right context. First of all, when you said the word person, let's take like anyone's. If you had a good parent, that person, your father and mother or mother, they had loving qualities towards you as when you were a child, and therefore they expressed the character of a loving parent, right? Now, before you were born, when they were teenagers, or maybe like when they were children, that possibility was not expressible. Yet it was just maybe something that would later reveal itself, right?
Okay.
So why can't agape love be that? Just like sovereignty. Sovereignty is the exercise and dominion over of one's authority and exercising that. And so what's the problem here? Because you're you don't even need to talk about God in this situation. Let's talk about a parent. A parent cannot express love if they're like a child themselves and they don't have a child to express love to.
Yeah, but like I'm saying, I mean, I think he's just trying to say that
it's kind of incomprehensible.
It's not a matter of. I think he's trying to say that it's not a matter of God specifically. That it could be the case that
any agent.
Any agent. But like, right, the point is that these analogies of a family and other agents don't hold so well. Don't hold up so well as analogies, at least as far as I can see. Exactly because they exist within creation, as in they have things to potentially express self-sacrifice with.
Isn't that arbitrary?
Yeah, but I'd like to address David on the monarchy. If it is the case, David, that God requires creation to be sovereign, right? Then He's contingent upon creation to be sovereign. It is the case that within the Trinity there is a monarchical view where there is the Father and there is some sort of monarchy within that.
It's exactly the problem.
And allows for those.
I don't know what you all are talking about. This is
to be
like
realized, and those qualities. And I would argue with. I would agree with that.
Crystal shit. Evolve it to the next consciousness. Why are we talking about?
Yeah, this is just. This is
we're talking
medieval,
about Christianity.
Yeah, this is medieval psychology.
No, this is like crystals, essential oils.
You're talking about New Age, one next generation.
Blue, I believe is the word we're looking for.
Right. So
there's a channel for you called Tarouge Global, and you can listen to, where they mix and match everything. Selah.
I don't want to be in a symbiotic relationship with anybody. I consider such a relationship unhealthy, right? A truly healthy one is an adult relationship where you're an individual in a reciprocal relationship with somebody else, not symbiosis, not emerging of selves into a hive mind.
Selah was the one talking about the symbiotic relationship, which is not what Christians express.
Excuse me. None of this is healthy for anybody. This isn't a good family. This isn't a good model for even a deity. This is just sickness, and I don't think that any of it is just it. You're just sort of just.
That's what I thought. This is just not what's that question? I don't think.
Well, let's just stop using.
You didn't understand any of that.
Speculations about.
It's a nice thought what you're saying. It's just not what is at question, whether or not it's a good model for a family.
I would reject this. I would reject this as a model to be admired and emulated. I think if this is your idea of God's relationship with Himself, He's a sick individual.
Yeah, but I don't think that's what the Christians are.
I wouldn't imagine.
I don't care if they're interested or not.
So you just come in to like cry and just like a conversation. So
Are you allowing? Did you allow a New Ager to define the Godhead, the relationship within the Godhead? That's because that's what you just did.
What are you talking about?
Your New Age, Brenda?
Brenda, just like get out whatever you need to complain about today.
No, I just said that I don't consider. I heard talk about symbiotic relationships being and it being implicated that was an ideal family structure, and I'm objecting to that. I'm saying that it's not, right?
Well, then you should address Selah. That's the one who was speaking.
Yeah, I think
no, I'm addressing everybody. What the fuck are you
flowing
so triggered about?
I think flowing and when I use the word symbiotic as a metaphor, I think flowing in that metaphorical symbiotic state doesn't take away from your individuality in any sense, but actually being an individual and being able to still flow with one another is the epitome of what love is. If you take away that individuality, then it doesn't become love, actually. So to be able to maintain that individuality while still being consideration of others is the essence of love.
Yeah, I think we're getting a little far afield here. The whole idea was that was about agape love, and the question was, given that agape love is self-sacrificing, and that prior to creation there was but the three persons of the Trinity, the Godhead, there was just God Himself and nothing else. The question will be, what was being sacrificed? And I still haven't heard an answer, really. There's going to be a thing. Something is going to be sacrificed.
Yeah, it was the Word. It was the Lamb.
Yeah, but
Revelation 13 is Revelation. You can look it up. You can look it up. It's Revelation 13:8.
Yeah, I looked up the definition. It doesn't say anything about sacrifice. Agape being sacrificed.
Given,
It's not.
we're addressing some other Christians' view, Brenda. It's not
David, you said prior.
I don't care about their view.
Yeah, but that's the discussion. The discussion.
Well, then where did he come up with the idea that agape love is sacrifice?
Other Christians that Tom was addressing. This is an argument that
agape love is sacrifice because if I am a creator, then I am continually giving of myself. So, like, if I'm a painter, I'm going to finish it, and then if you want to add your thought, that's fine. If I'm a painter, in order to create paintings, I'm continually giving of my creativity. So if God, being a creator, is continually creating, then He is continually giving of Himself in that creation process.
Yeah, I think that's a bad analogy because I am an artist. I've created artistic works, and it's simply the process of creation is simply the expression of how you feel at that particular moment, right? So if you're depressed or something like that, you might express depression, or you might express other feelings and emotions. That's what creativity is. It's not giving yourself.
Well, but more importantly, it was before creation, right? So He's not creating before creation. That's what we were asking.
Yeah, let's deal with David's what David had to say. He said that the Lamb was slain prior to the foundations of the earth, right? Now, presumably, prior to the foundations of the earth, I mean that is not prior to all of creation, right? We're not going all the way back when it was merely God Himself as the three persons, right? We're just talking prior to the foundations of the earth or the world, right? So we're going even further back than that. It's just sans creation, prior to any created thing, anything. The earth, heavenly realm.
Does that include angels?
Yeah, before the angels, unless you were to say that the angels coexisted eternally with God, but I don't think people would say that. But
what they think.
Yeah, David, you have to grapple with this, with the argument itself. It seems like you're just not dealing with it head on.
I don't understand the argument. Can you repeat the argument?
Okay, so
I have a question. Is love needed at all if there are no needs to be satisfied? If you don't have needs, do you need love?
God doesn't need love now.
I mean, I think you have your
I
answer,
mean,
right?
agape love is
You can't
described
need.
in detail in 1 Corinthians 13. I don't know why no one's addressing that. Love is patient, love is kind, love is not jealous or boastful, is not arrogant or rude, love does not insist on its own way, it is not irritable or resentful, it does not rejoice at wrong, but rejoices at the right. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Now, if you don't have any needs, do you need love at all? Like, why do you need to be kind, for example? Well, you need to be kind to people that need kindness, right? Does God need kindness? Is he lacking something? Does he have any needs?
I don't think that God needs anything, but I do think that God wants.
How could he want something he doesn't need?
I think there's a difference between having to have something to exist and like basically like I don't need this to survive. However, I want this. There's a difference between this, like basically like food and air and things like that. I don't need. I don't. Yeah, there's things that I need in order to exist. I don't think that love and praise and admiration are things that God needs to exist, but I think that there are things that he wants, and the reason that he wants it is to fully express that which God is.
So they're superfluous?
I think you guys are approaching this conversation the wrong way. You guys are like, you want to have a less new age. I want to amp up the new age, baby. Let's go all in, baby. Let's
Please, no. Bring the crystals back.
You know where I was really hoping that the conversation would go is that if God is agape love, then why are people going to burn in their blubber forever and ever? Because that is the problem, I think, that Christians fear.
Oh, I know the
like
answer to that.
That's
Christians.
interesting.
Yeah, that's where I was hoping that this conversation was going to go, because if we claim that God is unconditional, then either God doesn't want to save all humanity or can't save all humanity. And so, but then that means that God is not then God is not agape that we say.
Well,
but the reality is,
children. The people in hell are not his children. That's the
no, because so the reality is that God could have saved everybody, but he didn't. Or God could have saved everyone, but he didn't, or he can't save everyone. So either God is not all powerful,
You're just
or God
restating
is
the
not
problem
all
of evil, Selah.
So it would just be more like ether, spiritual. Like I need
what I
like
think I'm
more
stating
terms.
is
Like
the
I need
problem.
more new age.
I think
I
the
need more.
problem that I'm stating is the eternal conscious torment that a lot of Christians stand on in this day and age, when the early church did not
Clang your
have
crystals
that.
together, and just clang your crystals together, and
No, David, I don't have crystals.
No, it's David.
Referencing.
So David, now that's so interesting that you would take that kind of dismissive view when you were skewered on the problem of evil by me. Right?
No, I absolutely, I crucified you on that problem.
Oh yeah.
I expressed clearly that libertarian free will is essential to salvation. I think you skewered John properly about 2 weeks ago on the compatibilist view, and you showed how the compatibilist view arrives at essentially a contradiction, where you have states that are
good, or you basically get moral relativism, right? And I think that was you would agree that you definitely got him, right? And I was saying no, and you said you would argue in a separate manner against libertarian free will.
Yeah, what did I say about libertarian free will, dumbass? What did I say about that? Do you remember?
I'm not going to.
Yeah, so fuck off with your fucking condescension, right? If you aren't willing to defend your dumb fucking views, right? And I'll tell you where you go fucking wrong with libertarianism, right? Because the point is, if we understand good to be a fucking normative notion, right? If there isn't some way to bring about those same outcomes that are good without those libertarian free acts without those libertarian free acts of evil occurring, right? Then those things are all things considered goods, right? Those libertarian free acts of sin or evil are actually all things considered goods on your fucking view.
No, that's the Calvinist, sir.
Sorry. Is there a way for God to bring about those ends without those actions taking place?
Those actions, I said those are Calvinist. Those are Calvinist.
Answer my fucking question. Is there a way for God to bring about those ends without those actions taking place? Yeah, you fucking crucified me, you fucking piece of garbage. You fucking crucified me, you fucking dishonest piece of garbage. How dare you condescend with your fucking crystals bullshit, right? With your fucking crystals comment. Yeah, you know why? Because you don't have a fucking answer.
I do have
You don't have a fucking... Okay, give me the fucking answer then.
Alright, so God revealed...
Did you hear my fucking question? What's my fucking question?
Could God have achieved the ends of redemption for mankind without terrible things occurring, without people doing terrible things to each other?
Yeah, so what's the answer? That's a yes or no fucking question. Fucking dishonest piece of garbage.
Because by virtue...
There wasn't a way, right? So then my argument goes through that those things are all things considered goods, you fucking asshole.
They're not considered good.
Sorry.
They're not considered good.
Sorry.
They're not considered good by God.
You understand what I mean by all things considered good?
Did you hear what I said, you idiot?
Yeah, do you understand what I said? Do you understand what I mean by all things?
It doesn't make yourself more right.
So you don't have an answer to the question? Do you understand what I mean by all things considered good?
I did answer it to you.
You're saying those actions ought to happen, right? Because it's not possible. You're saying those actions...
it's
not actually possible, right? For those, it's not possible, right? It's not possible to bring about those ends without the evil acts occurring, right? So those things are necessary for God's good end to be satisfied. That's your claim, right?
That's the Calvinist claim, you idiot.
Sorry, I just asked you whether it was necessary, and you said yes. So you retracting that?
I said that's the Calvinist claim.
So it's not necessary. You're saying they're not necessary.
Do you understand what position
I just asked you a fucking question. You're saying it's not necessary. That's a yes or no question. What's the fucking answer, dumbass? You want me to repeat the fucking question?
Your question about...
Is it fucking necessary or not? That's a yes or no fucking question. Give me the fucking answer, you condescending piece of garbage. Give me the fucking answer. Yes or no? Is it necessary or not?
It is not necessary.
It's not necessary. Okay. So, God can actualize all logically possible states of affairs on your view, right?
Yes, he has the sovereignty, but he doesn't...
Shut your mouth, I'm not done.
Shut your mouth.
Shut your mouth, I'm not done.
You've been talking. Okay, so God has the sovereignty.
You're saying that he can actualize all logically possible states of affairs.
God has sovereignty doesn't mean he exercises sovereignty all the time.
That means it's not necessary.
I ask you a question.
That means it's not necessary.
You asked me a question.
Sorry.
I'm going to ask you a question.
It's not necessary for him to permit those things to occur, right?
Does God, who has sovereignty, if he has sovereignty, must he exercise sovereignty at all times?
If he's perfectly good, and if that sovereignty is required to bring about the good ends, right, then he is required. He is morally required to do so.
Jack, that's the framework. You're bringing forward the Calvinist framework, sir.
Sorry. Is it your view that God is omnibenevolent or not?
Yes, he is omnibenevolent.
Great. Now, does omnibenevolent mean that God seeks to maximize the good?
God does not seek to maximize the good. God seeks to restore man to himself.
Sorry. What does it mean to say he's omnibenevolent if it doesn't mean that he seeks to maximize the good?
God is not a utilitarian, Jack.
Sorry. We're understanding good to be... Shut up! Shut your fucking mouth! Is good a normative notion or not?
I asked you a question.
Yeah, I'm asking you a question. Is good a normative notion or not?
I said, why, if God is sovereign, does he...
You think I'm going to drop the fucking question?
Why
you think I'm going to drop the fucking question, David, you dishonest piece of garbage? You think I'm going to let you get away with not answering the question? Is good a normative notion or not? You dishonest piece of garbage. Yeah, is it a normative notion? Because what I was talking about was a normative notion, that good is an action-guiding notion. So if you say God is perfectly good, right, that means that he acts to maximize the good, right?
God is not a utilitarian.
Did you say anything about utilitarianism, you fucking piece of garbage?
Yes, you did.
No, I didn't.
Yes, you did.
I'm saying that it's a normative notion. Do you understand what that fucking means?
Please explain it to me. How is that different?
It means that it's action guiding, right? When you say God is good, that means that what he does is good. He does the best possible thing in any given circumstance.
That is correct.
Great.
Great.
So it's going to follow then that when God has a choice, right, between permitting some evil event to occur, right, and not permitting it, right, he's going to be obliged to exercise his sovereignty, right, to not permit the evil event to occur.
Oh, why?
That's what it means, because he's perfectly good.
Sovereignty means. You've defined sovereignty to mean that if you have sovereignty, you must exercise that sovereignty.
So no, what I'm saying is that omnibenevolence requires that, right? Now we just agreed. We just agreed that Sorry, did we agree?
And I just told you.
Sorry,
you made a God who has these qualities.
Are you saying that it's a better action, right, to permit evil than to prevent it? Is that what you're saying? It's a better action?
God doesn't permit that evil.
Does God have the capacity to prevent that evil from occurring?
God gives the free will.
That's a yes or no fucking question. That's a yes or no fucking question, dumbass. Does he have the power to prevent that evil from occurring or not? Yes or no? Yeah, he does, right? That's what I mean by permitting fucking... Shut up! Shut up! Shut your mouth! Shut your mouth! Shut your mouth!
Jack, you're going to get a heart attack. I'm telling you.
Shut your mouth. Look, you can keep interrupting me as much as you want.
Yeah,
you can keep interrupting me as much as you want. I'm just going to end up repeating the question.
You're literally like in front of...
All right, I'm going to ask the moderators.
You're going to get yourself into early heart.
Jane, are you here?
Yeah.
Can you do me a favor? Yeah. Can one of you guys, if I start talking and this guy opens his fucking mouth, can you fucking mute him?
He seems to have run away.
Okay. Fucking dishonest piece of garbage.
Well, it sounds like
dishonest.
Sayla wants to fight you now, Jack. She's in...
Who?
Sayla.
Who's that? She's the person that David or whatever was saying, the thing about the crystals.
Did you hear that condescending, fucking arrogant prick?
Yeah, he's a fucking piece of garbage.
Hey, Jack.
Yeah.
Can I take a crack at it? What you're like what you're asking and what you're saying. Do you mind if I take a crack at it?
Go ahead.
Okay. So, is it
You work in the word
possible-
essence a lot. I like that one.
Thanks. That was me bringing my A game. I appreciate it. Let's see. So, is it possible? Okay, if God allows evil in order to create free will, in order for people to experience what both good and evil is, in order for let's just say, for example, when all of that is rectified, and let's say everything is put back in its rightful place and everything is restored back to God, is it problematic that God would allow for people to have a freedom of choice so that they could experience evil, so that when it was all taken away, they would have a for lack of better words, a paradise experience for eternity? So if I was going to have an eternal existence, would it be hey, this is actually a good idea for people to experience both good and evil, so that when evil was finally taken away from all of creation and everything was restored back to God, that we would have a frame of reference to know what it's like to be disconnected from the source and what it's like to be disconnected from love, to have something to appreciate in our new state? Like, so you could actually say that it is good that God allows for bad to happen, because ultimately it will no longer be so. But I think it's problematic if God allows this evil and it's never restored back to. So if a Christian believes that everything is not restored back to God finally in the end, then yeah, that's super problematic. But if it is allowed in order for free will to be obtained, but everyone will be restored back, then I see it as a pretty good way to experience. What do you think about that?
I'm understanding the good to be what ought to be done, and evil to be what ought not be done. So if some evil is permitted for the sake of some greater good, that just means it ought to be done, which means it's a good. And
yeah, so I think that you're right to say that it is good for us to be able to do what ought not to be done for the greater good. So I would agree with that statement. It is good for us to do what not. It is good for us to experience doing what ought not to be done in order for the greater good.
No, he's saying it's straight up not what ought not be done. It's straight up good.
I didn't hear you. You broke up, Young. Can you say it one more time?
He's saying that it's straight up not an evil.
No, I wouldn't say that it's not an evil, but I would say that it is good for us to experience evil, because especially if, in the end, all will be restored, everyone and everything that has ever been created. But if not, then it really blows.
I think what he was trying to tell you is that this greater good narrative, the evil that leads to the greater good, is just straight up not an evil because it leads to the greater good. I think that's what he was
What does it mean to
saying.
call it an evil if it's necessary for this so-called good?
I would disagree with that. I think that it can coexist, that all things will work. So even those things that ought not to be done, and even those things that work to our good. So even those things that are bad ultimately will work to our good. But that doesn't negate the fact that it's bad. It's just that ultimately it will work to our good. And so, yes, you can then say that even the bad was good, but that doesn't negate the fact that it was bad. It's just that the bad ultimately will work for your good. So you can say that bad is ultimately good, because in the end, it will give us a reference point of what we came here to do on this earth, is to experience.
So what's the point in calling it evil if it's necessary for the desired outcome, or what ought to be done, what ought to occur?
Because that which is harmful is still harmful, even though that harm adds to our information bank.
It's so unnecessary. Sorry. That was great. Jack, are you there?
Sorry, what's the question?
I wanted to ask you.
No, there's no question. It's fine. I mean,
no. I wanted to ask him a thing.
Oh, okay.
Or should I not?
No, please.
The thing about what you were saying, you were basically just saying that in these soul building things, right? That the quote unquote necessary evil just straight up shouldn't be considered an evil then, or something
That's
like
right.
that, right?
That's right. It ought to be done, and it's
I sort of-
contradictory to say an evil ought to be done.
I get that. So you don't buy that. I don't exactly remember the line of reasoning, but I was trying to remember it the other day for John. There's this sort of objection that I've heard from like a few different people when it comes to these soul building things, which is something like, if God, if the evil is truly necessary, that means that God couldn't have instantiated like some alternative scenario or whatever, and that basically that's necessary, so that God, being all good or something like this, right? Like possessing this greater good, would be constrained to also go through the preceding evil. You get what I mean, sort of? Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Yes. I think that...
No, I'm I was trying to ask Jack specifically because I'm curious about how...
Well, I didn't really follow it. Philip, do you follow?
I'm saying something like, I've heard it argued, right? People bring up the soul building thing, so they say there's this evil that is necessary to achieve a good, right? And I've heard as an objection to that if that evil is truly necessary, as in like logically necessary for the good to be attained, that is problematic because it would apply to God as well, given that he is all good or something like that. So, Mike, do you understand what I'm saying there?
Well, I don't know, maybe Philip is following you better than I am, but there is an issue in soul-building theodicies, which is, why would souls need to be built if God is perfectly good and doesn't need to have his soul built, right?
Yeah,
why doesn't God
it's basically, right, it's basically saying that if the evil is necessary, then it means that the soul building also applies to God or something like this. Right,
yeah, that's right. That's right. You can just sort of ask, well, why didn't God create souls that already had those virtues?
Right, exactly. That's exactly. But
yeah.
I'm saying, does that work view that the evil is not necessary to begin with, as you were saying prior? You get what I mean?
Yeah, that would be a different objection. That would just be saying that these are gratuitous. See the point on the logical, because the soul building is usually brought up in connection with the evidential argument, which is an argument that has as a background assumption that some evil may be permissible, right? And the logical problem which I was running is going to deny that any evil is compatible.
So they're just different kinds, right?
Yeah.
I was just curious whether or not someone who gives that kind of objection about the soul building being also applicable to God and that being possibly problematic, if that meshes with the view that the evil is just straight up necessary or made. That the evil is sort of retroactively made good by the fact that it creates a greater good.
Yeah, they're going to want to deny that it's retroactively made good because they're committed to the idea that evil exists, right?
Yeah.
But it's hard to see how they can do that. Well, it just doesn't seem possible for them to resist that, because if they are saying it's necessary for the sake of some greater good, then they're just saying that what they're calling an evil is something that ought to be permitted. And evil is something that ought not be permitted. That's definitionally what it is.
Right.
So they would just be contradicting.
How is a necessary evil not just a straight up contradiction?
I thought that evil is permitted. That's why we have the choice to do it.
I'm saying is that what evil is something that ought not be permitted. If it ought be permitted for the sake of some greater good, then that just means it's not an evil. It ought to be done. That's how I'm understanding the terms good and evil. What is good ought to be done, right? What is evil ought not be done, right? And so I'm just saying that if something is genuinely evil, that just means it's impermissible, right? So if somebody says, no, we ought to permit this because some greater good will result, then you're saying it ought to be done, right? Which is what the good is. Evil is what ought not be done. So it's not an evil if it should be permitted. That's what I'm saying.
I maybe you can explain it to me. Let me say this, and maybe you'll correct my thinking if I'm. Why can I not create an experience where people can choose to do well and choose not to do well, while maintaining that when they do not do well, those will collectively be experiences to like learn from? Like, why is there not the option that not doing well or even like something harmful, why can I, in order for to allow free will, why can I not allow a choice between something harmful and not harmful? And then even when the harmful thing is chosen, it is utilized to it is turned into something good. So it doesn't change the fact that it is harmful. However, I have the ability to use what was intended for your harm to inevitably be for your good. Why can't those two coexist? Inevitably, that means that that which is harmful turns into your good, but it doesn't change the fact that it was harmful. That's the part that my brain is kind of hiccuping on.
I'm just saying evil is what ought not be done. Good is what ought to be done. So if what you're calling harmful, right, is somehow permitted because it's justified by some greater good, then you're just saying that it's something that ought to happen, not something that ought not happen. And that just means that it's good.
Okay, so Jack, my child ought not touch the stove, but when she does, it adds to her knowing not to touch the stove anymore. But that doesn't mean she shouldn't have touched the stove. What do you think about that one?
Well, if she shouldn't have touched it, then that you're probably saying that there's some other way she could have acquired that knowledge without undergoing that experience, right?
So that's an excellent.
But if you think that the only way she can acquire that knowledge is through that experience or an experience of that kind, and you think that her having that knowledge is better than her undergoing an experience of that kind, then given that undergoing experience of that kind is necessary for acquiring that knowledge, which is some kind of, let's say, intrinsic good or something, then you're just saying she ought to undergo those experiences.
That's an excellent point, Jack. And I'm not sure, like, if I created my child to never do things that I don't want her to do, then she would never have the experience of understanding like why, or even like that it's an excellent point. I guess like my thinking would be is that then there is no free will. Like I've automatically made you that way, and it is so that like if I say she can learn from my words, me saying you don't want to touch the hot stove. However, in life, going about like, okay, don't date that boy. That boy's gonna hurt you. But ultimately, choosing to date the boy adds to her frame of information. Now, I could have made her in a way that she would never choose to pick that kind of boy, but then she would be a robot. So, I guess your point is really excellent. I can't say that I don't know if God could have created it any other way that we could still utilize free will and acquire the information needed so that the next phase of whatever we have, if there is a place beyond this, that experience be a certain way. I don't know. I can't say that that God could or couldn't, but in what we do have, the way that it seems that He's created it, if there being a God, is that good and evil are present in order for there to be a free will present. Yeah, I don't know if I'm just talking in circles. I probably am. Sorry about that.
Jack, can I try?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So, Sila, do you remember what the original topic was about?
Yeah, there was two of them. One of them was the one that I walked in on was a little bit different. What was that one?
So, do you know what the logical problem of evil is? You know what that is?
Yes, I've heard of the logical problem of evil.
Okay, so I think the original topic was the logical problem of evil. So I think that's what Jack was originally saying, right? So imagine it's not the case that your daughter or whoever, like this little girl, is like touching the stove. She's about to like fall off a 12-story building, right? So you would have the obligation to stop her from falling off the 12-story building, right? Like if you knew about it and if you had the means to do it, like you were running distance away from her, you would have the obligation to do it. So if you didn't do that, that would be wrong. Like just letting her fall off the building, right?
Well, let me answer your question with a question. If my daughter was walking and she was learning to walk, and I didn't stop her from falling when she was learning to walk because I wanted her to learn to walk, would that be considered evil? And when you answer that, it'll help me answer the other one. So let's say she's walking and I don't stop her from falling because I want her to strengthen her legs and learn to walk. If I let her fall, is that like bad?
If negative reinforcement is necessary, then permitted, right? We would just, that's like a way to get to the greater good. But the way I would answer this is I would.
So Max, I think that's the same thing with the falling off a building thing. So if I am an entity that has the ability to restore everything back to its original state, and not just some things or some who only do well and only do what I say, but literally everything that is under the cosmos and beyond, that I have the ability to restore everything back to its original state, then yes, I might let that entity experience certain things if it means that that information acquired is going to be what is needed in order to value or strengthen the next level, if that makes any sense. Like I might not interfere is what I'm saying, if that is what it's going to take in order for the child to learn to walk, basically.
Okay, so I have a question then for you. Do you think God doesn't have the means to teach us all these things without negative reinforcement, or do you think negative reinforcement is necessary?
I think that negative, not reinforcement, but negative experiences is probably necessary in order for free will to be present. I think that God could have created us all with no bad experiences or no knowledge of evil, but then we would not have free will at all. We would just be a robot programmed creation.
Okay, so what do you mean by free will? Right? Because presumably, if you just mean the ability to choose otherwise, as far as I know, no Christian believes that, like the fall or whatever, resulted in giving us that sort of free will, right? Like, you mean something else by it, right?
Actually, that's a really great question too, Max. What I mean by free will, it's probably different than what others mean by free will, and you're right to say so. The only choice that we actually ever make freely are choices that are not antithetical. Like, I want to say good, but let me just say it like this. Are true to like who we are. So like anytime we make choices that are harmful to us, that's actually, in my opinion, not actually a free will choice. I think when we make decisions that are harmful to ourselves and others, this is actually a choice made under deception, brokenness, imbalances. So the actual only free will choice that we have is the choice that is made to act in who we really are, like the way that we were truly designed to be. So that's my idea of free will. But anytime we're making a choice outside of that, we're making a choice actually that is made in bondage and brokenness and warped vision.
Well, then, like, what does that have to do with the earlier point? Because you said free will requires you to have negative experiences, but then you sort of said, well, I define free will as, can I summarize it in saying, like, whenever you align your ends towards whatever is good, or something like that?
I think I was so focused on the beginning part of what you said that I didn't catch the last part of what you said. Can you repeat that part?
Yeah, like, do you think, you said that free will, right, entails that bad experiences are necessary for individuals, right? But then you define free will, it seems like, as just the ability to choose good ends or something like that. Right?
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that maybe if I said it that way, that you're making a great point. I would kind of adjust it to not be that bad experiences, but the ability to make harmful choices, which would be bad experiences. But just to make it a little bit more refined and clear, the ability to make the ability to make good choices, because that's the only free will we have, and the ability to not choose who we truly are and experience making choices that are not true to who we are.
Okay, so why does that entail, or why does it necessarily follow from that definition, that we're able to choose good things, that we have to, like, it's necessary that we experience harm or bad things?
Well, it's not necessary that we look at it like that. We're only looking at it like that because we're talking about like my perspective. So it's not necessary that we look at it like that. But from my perspective, we look at it like that because I do believe that there's something after this experience that we go through here, and I believe that experience is much better than what we experience here. And then to fully understand and comprehend and to appreciate that next experience, we have to experience these things, touch these things. Does that make sense, Max?
Sure, but so can we reel this back into the original question? So the logical problem of evil says that because anyone is obligated to like prevent an evil if they have the means to do so, and if they're aware of it, because God is both omniscient, he's aware of everything, because God is omnipotent, he can do anything, then God is obligated to prevent all evils. Now, you said that you define free will as this sort of alignment of our ends towards the good. But if you read like Christians, like St. Athanasius and Against the Heathen, the way that it interprets the Genesis story is that prior to eating from the tree of knowledge, this is the free will we had beforehand. And then the free will we had after eating that, right? The snake says that you will become gods, is to freely choose our ends towards sin, right? So what you're describing is actually the problem that we're talking about right now. It doesn't solve the problem, like the logical problem of evil, right? Because if God was all good, then he would prevent all evils, because he would them.
I think, Max, if God did not have the capacity to restore all things back to himself, then you're right. He is obligated to. Sorry, I ran out of battery. I don't know if y'all didn't hear me, but like it showed me I was low on battery. So if God did not have the ability to restore, then I think that you'd be absolutely right. And I think
I think interrupt you like really quickly because I think you're getting into some sort of argument where it's like you could redeem all the evils. The problem with that argument is the logical problem of evil is given as specifically showing that there's a contradictory claim. It's a reason to reject the existence of God. It's not so much like a problem that like a Christian necessarily needs to have. You can always say, like, for instance, evil doesn't exist, and just define evil in a certain way as like not being substantive, and like most people think it's substantive or something like that, right? It's some sort of quality a thing has, some sort of attribute a thing has. But the problem, right, is that for like the atheist, they'll just use this argument as like a very strong indication of why they don't believe in a God, because they think it entails some sort of contradiction if you use the three omni attributes, right? So the problem is not, it's not that God can restore everything back into himself, or can restore everything back to the good. The problem is that there's no reason to believe in God if, his three omni attributes entail a contradiction, because we can see evils in the world. So do you see how like the argument is actually deployed? Or
the beginning part I did, the last part I wasn't able to see how that works actually, like.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll let someone else talk if they want to talk. I think I've talked enough. So.
Thank you, Max.
I
really
did
for
want to
that
say that
exchange
I
of
just
ideas.
I wanted to say one thing that I was saying, Max, before, is that I think for most Christians who believe that that the Christians that believe that half of or more of most of humanity is going to fry in their blubber forever and ever, that's super problematic. The problem of evil that you're saying, actually, like, super huge problem that they got to deal with. But as for somebody like me who doesn't believe that there's this never-ending torture chamber, and I believe, like much of the early church believed, is that God restored everything back to himself, and that fire that they're talking about is actually a refining fire that is restorative in nature. So, like, let's say, for example,
I mean, to be
anything that...
clear, I'm a Christian.
Oh,
I'm
cool, Max. Great.
Orthodox.
Sorry, no offense or anything.
Yeah, but like, I just don't think you understand the problem, right? You know, because the problem is not so much.
Max, can you let me finish my thought? Only because I'm very forgetful and I don't want to lose it.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I think that when you believe in eternal conscious torment, then that problem really does exist. Like, how is it okay for you to allow this evil to go on and it never be restored in the end? Because in actuality, with eternal conscious torment, there's going to be people that are never going to be restored because of a finite mistake. They're going to infinitely burn in their blubber. However, the early church, the majority of them, some believed in annihilation, and some believed that hell was a restorative justice, so that anything that was on you, or like, if there's a refining fire and you take gold and you put it in the fire, any dirt that is a part of that on that gold is going to fall off of that gold. So it wasn't a justice that just never stops, but it was a justice that is restorative in nature. So yes, that you would be judged. So, like, if you're a pedophile or whatever have you, there would be a true judgment, but in the end, you would be restored back into your right mind. That's what many of the early church believed is called apostasis. And so I do believe that when you do have the paradigm that at the end of the day, God is not going to just leave anyone behind, then you have the ability to open the door for this experience of free will. But if you are just going to leave them in that state, and that there is no ultimate restoring and sorry for you, then that would be a really hard case to make.
So I just want to say two things. This is sort of
Nice.
But the early church probably mostly believed in eternal conscious torment. If you read Saint Irenaeus, like a lot of annihilationists, they like to read the ceasing of existence. But if you read specifically the chapters where he argues against reincarnation or whatever, he specifically endorses eternal conscious torment. He just doesn't think the fires are literal, right? Most of the early church didn't believe in universalism, apostasis. That just refers to, in Orthodox theology, it just refers to the returning of the human nature back into Jesus. And in general, like, I can only think of like two people who were like universalists, like Saint Gregory of Nyssa and then Origen. And Origen was condemned, right, by Justinian. And then Saint Gregory of Nyssa, his brother Saint Basil said he was wrong on that question, and that if you teach this, it's heresy, right? So I don't think you're correct. Anyways,
Max,
if anyone...
Yeah, I believe that you are very wrong, and I urge anyone that's listening to look it up, that up until the first 500 to 600 years, the early church, the predominant views was universal reconciliation and annihilation. There were 9 schools of theology. 6 of them were, let me see, hold on real quick. 6 of them were universal reconciliation. 3 of them were no, I'm sorry. 6 of them were I think three or four of them were annihilation, but the moral of the story is that only one was eternal conscious torment, and that comes out of Rome for good reason. When you have eternal conscious torment really hits the scene with Augustine. And when Augustine comes on the scene, he literally writes, I know this is not the predominant view, that this eternal conscious torment is not the predominant view, but nevertheless, let me tell you why I believe in it. And honestly, when the word got translated into Latin, there's a lot of good reason for them to come to that conclusion. But the reality that I urge you to look at is that up until the first 500, 600 years, the majority was not eternal conscious torment at all. At all. And I just don't even know where to begin in order to show the clarity on that. And that's not true. There are so many theologians that subscribe to either annihilation or universal reconciliation. It wasn't until Augustine that ECT starts to truly.
Augustine gets that from Tertullian. Tertullian lived around the time of Origen. Again, Origen's probably the only universalist because he was getting his theology specifically from what's his name again? Ammonius Saccas, I think. He was like taught by the Alexandrian Middle Platonists.
Yeah, and Origen was not condemned to heresy because of universal reconciliation. He was condemned to heresy because he had a whole entire doctrine that encompassed other things. The reason why I know that is because just like you mentioned, Gregory of Nicaea was a universal reconciliationist, and he was the one that was participated in the writing of the Nicene Creed. And one of the major reasons that you don't see any references to hell in the Nicene Creed is because there was so much discrepancy on what they believed about it. So that's why it's not mentioned, is because you had universal reconciliationists standing right next to annihilationists, and it was perfectly fine. They were able to coexist and discuss that. They didn't look at each other as heretics at all, Max.
Augustine was referring to the laity when he said that the majority of people don't hold to this view. Anyways, I don't want to talk more about this. It seems very off topic. I'll let anyone else talk. So.
Thank you for the exchange of ideas, guys.
You're dark.
What did you think of this? Phil doesn't talk.
I think I'm gonna unblock David Wee now because I want to go. The level of dishonesty was so off the scale that I want to go after him. So I want him to come into rooms that I'm in now.
He's very slimy. He's very condescending in like everything that he says.
Yeah. So I'm gonna unblock him.
Jack, did you hear anything, I guess, in that conversation that was even close to an answer to the LPT or LPE?
No.
Yeah, I don't think I did either.
But it was kind of the standard bullshit.
Who, David?
Yeah. Did I run the objection correctly, Phyllis?
Well, I don't think you yelled quite enough, but yeah, I guess so. Oh my god, that took like a minute. You were just immediately angry. Yeah, that sounded right.
I just didn't like the way that he was making fun. This is a guy who believes in talking snakes, right? And he's like making fun of this girl, you know. I just thought it's outrageous, particularly since he was dishonest in the previous discussion, you know? And I just thought, how dare he, of all people, take this tone, you know? It's like when Darth Dawkins starts to moralize, you know?
Oh my god.
Jack, do you still do discussions, debates around value theory and like economics?
It's been a while. I mean, actually, Daz wanted me to debate this guy, Econoboy. Do you know him? He's a YouTuber.
Yeah, I mean, I'm an economist, so we could discuss that. But I've read a lot of Marx, and I've read a lot of like Marxist literature, so I could probably run a couple of objections sometime.
Oh, that's interesting. So you don't accept the LTV?
Yeah, I don't accept really any version of it. Well, actually, I think the Ricardian one is okay, but I'm not really sure what it does as a theory, I guess.
I see. Well, are you familiar with Michael Roberts and Ernest Mandel and Fred Mosley?
Yeah.
So you've read their stuff?
I've read Michael Roberts' blog a bit. Fred Mosley, I think he was an editor of the 1868 manuscripts. It was basically the non-Engels edited version of Volume 3. And I think I read basically the first 5 chapters of it. But I read Volume 3, so, or both parts of it, so.
Well, I was just asking because Mosley has an article called something like Marxism, True or False, a response to Blaug's appraisal, I think. Something like that. It's on his web.
Mark Blaug, like the History of Economic Thought guy?
Yeah, because Mark Blaug, well, he edited this series. I mean, I don't know whether there were more than 2 or 3 volumes published in the series, which was the idea was that they'd take a school of economics and somebody would sort of try to assess it critically, and then somebody who's a proponent of the school would then sort of try to rebut the criticisms. And then I think there was maybe a final statement by the editor of the volume. And so there was one on neo-Ricardianism, I think, and there was one on Marxist economics. I don't know if there was even a third one. I know definitely those 2. And Blaug did the overview of the Marxian sort of position and tried to criticize it. And so then Mosley wrote this kind of response to Blaug. And I think that's one of the best sort of statements I've seen. I mean, it's fairly compressed, right, of the argument in defense of the LTV, right, as the correct sort of theory of capitalism.
I'd probably just do something like, what is it? So one on the falling rate of profit. When you're looking at it globally, I'm not sure if sort of the Marxist answers give any extra explanatory power over just some sort of just normal theory that I can sort of assess, where you just have labor saving technical change, and then what's the specific term for it? It's not. Is it Herod neutral growth? I don't remember. It's not Hicks neutral. I would just say that any of the predictions you can make under Marx's theory, generally I can just sort of come up with an independent explanation for that. It's relatively coherent. Sorry, my mind hasn't been on this topic in a while. Do you agree with Mosley's answer to the quote-unquote transformation problem. I really hate like talking about that because I don't really think there is one in Marx.
I haven't read the book, so I don't really fully understand the view. But I understand that even people who reject Mosley's position think it's mathematically consistent. So they're going to have to criticize it on something other than logical grounds. I think that's sort of like widely agreed upon. Now, Mosley, I assume, thinks that his solution, so-called solution to the transformation problem is consistent with the ensemble of predictions that he thinks corroborate the theory. So, on those grounds, I'd be inclined to accept his solution. But if it could be shown that there was another consistent solution, like Kleiman's,
Kleiman, I think it's the closest to Marx, but the problem is that he exposes the fact, in my opinion at least, that all Marx is doing is that if you decompose his theory to unit prices, and then you use like the traditional input-output sort of relative production coefficients model, whatever, right? And then you're getting the unit prices out of it. All you're doing is that you have to continually, make it so that output labor declines in every period. Otherwise, it'll snap back to sort of, a profit maximizing sort of equilibrium over time. And then you'll just get the same solution that you have in like a Sraffian system or something. And the problem with that is that in general, in no other like theory, if you take a basic class in like difference and differential equations, like you're not supposed to do that in a model, right? You can't just continually go off of equilibrium by changing one variable at every time step, because most economic models, they don't even have like sort of like a fundamental unit of time. Like people just take the limits of some sort of time variable to infinity, and they don't like posit something like a fundamental time scale, unlike physicists, right? Like really big economists do this all the time. Like trying to think of people off the top of my head. I know Solo has done it a couple of times. Anyways, my head isn't working. So you run into some problems there, and then I don't think Marx even sort of meant to really give anything past the theory of unit prices. I think his math is just sort of a product of its time. But
you don't think Marx meant to give something more than a theory of unit prices? Is that what you said?
No. I just think he never really intended his theory to be dissected to this degree and to like fit sort of the formalisms that people use in their sort of mathematical models today.
Well, I mean, again, I'm just going to try to go back to kind of Mosley's argument, which is an argument that I think somebody like Roberts would be friendly to, and is probably the kind of argument that is ultimately structuring a much more comprehensive treatment of the data to be found in Mandel's Marxist economic theory. And the idea is just going to say, given these certain assumptions, right, what predictive expectations can be generated, and then look for corroboration, right? And so the idea is going to be that you're going to get something like, roughly like a dozen predictions of long-term trends. And the majority, or perhaps vast majority, of those predictions are going to be predictively novel, so that's going to count as strongly confirmatory. But perhaps just as importantly, or maybe more so, would be the fact that there's an ensemble of predictions, and that there isn't going to really be a rival theory that can explain all those things.
Do you use the ones that Pogan uses? I think he has like a website where
Well, he probably got them from me, so,
okay.
So probably, but I haven't looked at what Pogan says.
I probably just do like relative model comparisons, and there are a couple of ones, like I've read Robert, so he's like, Roberts and Mandel, they're like K-wave theorists. So on those predictions, I just say that the specific independent variables that you've specified, those aren't things that you should be predicting in the first place. Those are the arguments I would just run. We were to debate on that. But I'd have to actually like write shit out to make it convincing.
Yeah, well, all I can say is it was that approach that sort of convinced me that the theory was true. And, so Mandel, I take Mandel's book. I mean, that is a fairly old book now, but it covers, well, if we're just talking about capitalism, I mean, he does discuss some issues that might be relevant to Marxist theory having to do with like pre-capitalist societies or very early capitalism. But if you're just dealing with the period starting from, say, 1825, he is covering, something like 135 years with his data. And then Mosley's article comes to the same conclusion as Mandel from kind of similar premises. And he surveys some of the data subsequent to Mandel, so covering, I don't know, maybe another 30 years, and comes to sort of like the same conclusion. Now, obviously, there's another 30 years or so since Mosley's article was published, and I think Roberts is one of the resources that I've relied on to see if the data continues to corroborate Marx in the way that I think Mandel and Mosley show. Now, of course, he brings other considerations to bear on the question, because in addition to these kind of secular trends, he also focuses on crisis. That's like his primary area of research. And so he does a kind of comparison with the kind of dominant crisis theories in, the neoclassical economics. And it seems to me, after, reading his columns over many years, that he's made a kind of like devastating case that Marxian crisis theory beats down the rival. So I take that to be kind of like a supplemental line of evidence, So, I mean, if you had a problem with him, I think it would be, or with Mosley, I think it would be probably worthwhile for you to, like, ask them to go on a stream with you or something and see how they would answer your criticism. Or you can email them. They do respond to emails, I happen to know, but yeah, I think it might be worthwhile for you to talk to them about the kinds of worries that you have.
I don't like wholesale reject everything Marx says. Like, I used to be a Marxist, and I think there's some interesting sort of questions in political economy some of these people look at. I think, like for instance, you brought up crisis theories. So these would be like overproduction versus something like overconsumption, under.
No, you're talking about Marxist crisis theories. Those are different, like Marxian crisis theories. I'm just talking about like standard neoclassical explanations of crises. So he basically focuses on kind of two schools of thought. I guess kind of like the Keynesian kind of understanding of capitalist crisis. That's probably the dominant one. And then I guess he calls them kind of Austerians. The people who...
Like the real business cycle people?
It might be those people. They're the people who want, who don't want there to be, like, a lot of government spending and so on. They don't want bailouts. They don't want a lot of government spending and so on. They want, they basically want the economy to sort of suffer in the short run, right?
Yeah, most people don't really believe in that in academia anymore, real business cycle. And then they're like Austrians, but they're sort of heterodox. They're mostly...
Yeah, well, I don't think he's talking about the Austrians, because they're kind of like a fringe sort of school, but just the people who are sort of like the opponents of these kind of Keynesian, the kind of Keynesian mainstream consensus, who are not like heterodox theorists,
Yeah, there's
he sort of looks at their way. He looks at each crisis and looks at how what would be expected in the data if their theories were true, vis-a-vis what would be expected if Marx is correct. And I think he's made like a really incredibly strong case that the Marxian labor theory of value is the best theory of capitalist crisis. But that's a case that's made out at length. Obviously he's got a couple of books on that topic, and a zillion articles and blog posts. So I would just direct you to him. I'm not sure there's that much I could say about it, because so much of it relies on scrutinizing the data, and it would be kind of tedious for me to rehearse all that stuff.
Yeah, I don't believe in crisis theory at all. So I would just make an argument that there's very like clear sort of historical causal reasons why you have like a recession, or you have like or maybe what they could be talking about are like periods of low real growth. So like certain secular stagnation theses, and then I just sort of address those. Yeah,
that's good. You should take it up with them. Then, if you think you have good criticisms, I'd recommend that you press them. Particularly Roberts, because that's what he deals with. And see what he has. See if he has good answers.
Yeah, maybe. I'm not too interested in that. I just remember you from the the academic agent days. So
nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Roberts, isn't he the one that's, I don't know if this is true, if I'm remembering correctly, isn't he of the view that China is like in some sense authentically communist or something like that. Wasn't he the guy that used to refers to like make that case or read about that case?
Yeah, he denies that China has like fully transitioned to capitalism, or at least I haven't read his latest column or posts on that, so maybe he's changed his mind, but as far as I can tell, he as far as I've read, up to the point where I was reading him regularly, he was arguing that it hasn't fully transitioned. It should be understood as still something like a worker state, though I don't know whether he uses that term.
Terminology.
But Manny actually said that Roberts convinced him.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm never sure what to make of that.
Yeah.
That China topic.
Me either. I don't know who's right in that debate, but it's an interesting position because it
the way I see it, like sort of intuitively, is that to the extent that it's true, it may be true that they're, if this makes sense to you, I don't know, but that they're communist or whatever, in terms of sort of governance style or something like that. You know what I mean? That they're sort of government.
Oh yeah, well,
politically speaking.
Yeah, in terms of how it's directed, there's clearly going to be like more state control, but to what extent I'm not exactly sure. I don't really remember exactly what considerations he brings to bear, but it's going to have something to do with like the percentage of assets that are privately owned and
that, and just beyond just the pure fact of like data of how much the economy is state controlled, just sort of how they act politically when it comes to, I don't know, running in sort of their nascent, like, what do you call it, like a oligarchy or plutocracy, whatever those words are, like rich, billionaires or stuff like that. I see stuff like that. That's sort of to which I'm able to understand it. Yeah.
Anyways, I gotta head out. I mod Nathan's Discord, Digital Gnosis. That's where I come from.
But there hasn't been a lot of activity on there, right? I mean, at least in the voice channels, right?
No.
Anybody in there?
No. Recently, a lot of Bernardo Kastrup's fans went in there, and they're like trying to argue for absolute idealism or whatever.
But Nathan is on Clubhouse now.
Yeah, he is.
So that's a good development.
Yeah. Anyways, I'll see you later. I'd love if any of you guys would follow me, but yeah.
Oh,
bye.
I'll follow you.
Wow, so sweet. Bye.
I'm not.
Was he arguing the problem of evil? Well, I was distracted. Phyllis, did you hear what he was saying?
I mean, sort of like, I wish he'd stop talking the way I heard what he was saying.
Wait, you wished he would stop talking what?
I wish he would stop talking the way I heard what he was saying.
But you thought it wasn't, I mean, was he not going about it properly, in your view?
I mean, it's somebody like, well, not with that person.
Okay.
there's not really a proper way to. I mean, let me put it this way: he sounded like he was actually interested in explaining the issue to her, which is like insane.
Oh, that's understandable. Yeah, I was trying. I hope she's not here because she was nice, but so I don't want to say anything that would hurt her feelings.
No,
but I was trying to extricate. I was trying to give, the simplest, clearest statement of my view, so I wouldn't have to try to explain it at length to her.
See, that's exactly what I wanted to happen, and then he got in the way.
Yeah, well, you and Tamar clearly have antithetical aims, because he wanted to hear as much nonsense come out of you.
Well, I did want her to say nonsense, but it was just nonsense in response to it. Yeah, like you say something that makes sense, and then she responds with something completely unintelligible, and then you're forced to respond.
Okay, so then yeah, you and Tom are aligned, and you're both the enemy. Though I have to admit, the John Lee thing has been surprisingly interesting, because the sheer sense of trauma that John Lee seems to have been undergoing the past few days is kind of amazing.
Well, I don't know what's happened. Just trolling.
Well, they've been running a couple of objections on John Lee, and he's just been like incredibly upset about it.
It's not the argument; it's the trolling.
What? What's the argument or arguments?
Well, first one has to do with the idea of God being, sort of like the Calvinist idea that God creates in order to receive man's glory.
Mm-hmm.
But so they were just sort of asking, well, if he's perfectly glorified prior to creation, then what could be rational about creating a world in which he would receive more glory when it doesn't add to the way that John sort of tried to deal with it by saying that it was a non-gradational property.
That's correct. Non-transactional.
There's no sort of degrees of glory. So God is perfectly glorified, whatever that means, prior to creation. But I don't see how making it non-gradational changes anything, because there's still no reason why. It just doesn't seem like there could be any good reason why he would then create in order to receive glory from man, right? So that's been one issue that John has been contending with, and it's just been pure insanity. But then they came up with this new one yesterday, which was
What do you mean they, man? Hey, give me some credit here, pal.
Tom.
These are my children, right?
Yeah, Tom came up with it. So it's what's the thing been? God, I've already forgotten.
It's about what is it?
Glory, perfection, then agape love.
Agape love.
Agape
right.
love,
So you probably heard part of it. So the idea is, here's like a sort of simple version of the objection, right? God is love, right? That's like one of these crazy claims, right? God is love, whatever that means. And so that's going to carry some kind of entailment, like God essentially is love, and which is bizarre because John Lee says he doesn't love everybody, right? So it's already sort of a mess. But let's just leave that part aside for the moment, because that's a separate issue. Now, they want to claim that agape love is the highest form of love, this kind of self-sacrificial love. And they got John Lee to concede that sacrifice was essential to this type of love.
Sure.
And so, of course, how sans creation is it the case that this sacrificial love is instantiated? And John Lee, he actually tried to say that the persons of the Trinity were engaged in a self-sacrificial love relation amongst each other.
That's correct.
And that's only the beginning of the insane directions that John Lee, I mean, he just went way off the rails. And of course, the best part of it was that he started to say stuff that was so nutty that even the nuttiest Christians, right, would not agree with him, right, which just meant that he was like totally out on a limb with these like insane views.
Oliver
right?
Salah agreed with me.
Who's that?
Oliver and Salah.
Oh, I don't even know who that is. Is that true, Tom? I was way behind today, so I'm sure I missed a lot of fun.
Oh, C'est la vie. Salah, that's funny. It says Salah.
Oh, C'est la vie. I don't know who that is, though. I mean, I now understand the name, but I don't know these people. But were you there for any of this?
I know both of them, sort of.
I mean,
yeah,
I don't.
Of course you know them, but I'm just wondering if Tom witnessed this.
Agreeing, but I wouldn't put much stock in that. I mean, it didn't sound like she agreed with you, though. No. Oliver? Who's Oliver?
Oliver Richardson, who was here before, right before Selah, right around after C'est la vie, I guess.
No idea who that is.
Yeah, but it was pretty wild, and John was getting incredibly
Will agreed as well.
Will? Who's Will?
He's like I think he's like a Jamaican Christian or something like that.
Oh, really? I don't think I know that guy. But wait, Tom, are you gonna make videos of these?
Oh yeah, I think I want to make that into like a mini movie or something like that. Like it'll have the conception at 2 a.m. Then it'll be like, hey, like, what do you think John's gonna say? And it's like me. I'm like, oh, you guys just like you guys are coming up with. You guys sit around and you think about these things. It's like you just start concocting stuff. You like living in like little fantasy land or something like that, right? And then like today where I bring it up to them, and then
the good thing I don't have to revise anything. Everyone else is walking their statements back.
And he goes insane today,
Yeah, so you'll get to see the highlights, Phyllis, when those get uploaded. But yeah, it was pretty wild. I mean, even for John Lee, it was just like it was.
My statements were biblical and consistent.
Biblical.
Now that's
that's a contradiction right there.
Do you know how the persons of the Trinity sacrificed to each other to enable agape love setting prior to creation?
I can't I mean, it just sounds logically impossible. So I don't know.
Did you say ontologically impossible? Is that what you said?
It sounds logically impossible. So I don't really know what you're gonna say.
I'm sorry.
Here's what they do to sacrifice to each other to enable the agape love setting. For example, Jesus looks at the Father and he goes, I'm lesser than you. You're greater than me. And then the Father looks at Jesus and goes, you know what? I'm lesser than you. You're greater than me.
Yeah, actually that doesn't happen, but...
Well, he was saying that the sacrifice was, how did he put it?
Concern for the interests of the other.
No, but you used the word perspective. How exactly did you use the term No, perspective. How did you use the word perspective?
Oh, yeah, perspective in the sense of not synonymous with belief. Is that what you're saying?
No, you were saying that it was not metaphysical. It was merely a change
like a
in
mindset.
perspective. Yeah, how did you use the word perspective? That's your word. I'm trying to remember exactly how you phrased it.
Well, I
It's not
thought
metaphysical. It's
I don't know what else. I thought it brought out all the words I used.
he just said like it's a perspective. The sacrifice is a perspective.
So,
Something
John.
like that.
The sacrifice is a perspective.
Oh, you want to start misrepresenting again, Tom? Is that where we're going?
There was one point where he talked about Jesus and this perspective thing.
Yeah, in other words, that the sacrifice is not metaphysical. It's merely perspectival or something. He didn't use that word, but something like the sacrifice is merely perspectival. And that included Jesus's, that includes the atonement. That Jesus's sacrifice of his life on the cross.
Yeah, it's kind of like loving someone and then acting in your love, and so the cross represents the action of the self-sacrificial.
What?
Like when you can love, right, and then you act upon that love, right? So Jesus's actions on the cross, work is actually understood as work. On the cross is an act of love. It's not love itself.
Yeah, but the point is that
it's
the
a
sacrifice
demonstration
is
of
not.
love.
What was the word you used? It's not metaphysical or not ontological.
All I'm saying is that the cross is a
He kept saying
demonstration.
it's not metaphysical. It's not metaphysical.
Right, it's not metaphysical. It's merely perspectival. And I have no idea what he's talking about.
Wait, okay, hold on. So, even the way you guys described it to me, it just sounded like a random set of statements. So I'm not really sure what to say. The only thing that I really understood was the part about how Jesus looks at the Father and he says, "I'm lesser than you," and then.
Oh yeah, can you explain this part? Wait, Tom, can you explain this part about? Wait, John, wait. I want Tom to give his version first. You can correct him after. Can you explain this part about? One of the loopiest parts of it was this idea that Jesus. There was a dilemma.
Right.
Either Jesus had to, he either had to believe something false, or.
Oh yeah. So my objection was that okay, so John kept saying, "It's not metaphysical. It's not metaphysical." So I was like, okay, I was trying to work out what he was trying to say, and he seems like to be saying that what he means by that is nothing like concrete was sacrificed. Like you're not going to point to a thing with like ontology.
So what are you going to break up your essence?
It's gonna be like okay, like a little bit of omnipotence. We lost a bit of that, eh? You know, it's like no, that's nothing was actually lost. So it has to be some kind of like abstract sense, right? So basically, with this, the abstract sense is this mindset where it's like, you know, he calls it mindset or perspective, where Jesus and like the persons of the Trinity are saying to each other, and this like his words, right? I'm lesser than you, and you're more than me.
Those are
I
your words.
consider myself lesser than you. That was very important.
Right. So the problem that I came up with was like, look, when Jesus says to the Father, and he has a mindset, or he has the belief, and he's saying inside of his head, I consider myself lesser than you, you're more than me, right? That is a false belief, right? Because
somebody has to have a false belief there, right? Yeah, like
any person of the Trinity, it's not the case that any one person is more or less than any other one, right? And all the beliefs of any person in the Trinity are going to be in accord with reality, So that is a false belief. So that's problem number one. Now, the second problem is the problem you're raising, where not only is it a problem with Jesus when he thinks to the Father, has this mindset of, I consider myself less than you. Well, then you have the Father looking at Jesus and saying, I consider myself less than you.
Yeah, I never.
And now not only do these beliefs now comport with reality, but they're actually in conflict with one another. Because it can't be true simultaneously that the Father is less than the Son and the Son is less than the Father.
So may I respond now? Or you guys just overtalk me and not get a response?
One more minute, John. And then the best part was that John tried to push back on this by saying, well, what the Bible doesn't actually say anything about belief. It uses the word consideration. He wanted to say that considerations were distinct from belief. And then it got even crazier, because then Steph came in and she tried to in some way clarify the issues by talking about how in the Bible the term consideration is used with respect to, what is it, trade?
No, an appraisal.
No, but she used the word trade.
No, but you're missing, but before even that, like Jack was saying, I can't wait to hear what all these other Christians have to say about
And then after Steph after she gave her exposition, John was really excited because it seemed like she was agreeing with him to some extent.
Well, she did on that.
That's what I've been saying all along. Hallelujah, amen, right? But then the idea that there was a sacrifice prior to creation, she thought was just totally out of hand.
Right.
There's just no way I can understand sacrifice prior to the incarnation and the crucifixion. And so then John said, well, I'm really he said something like, I'm really sorry to hear that. This is just hilarious. You just have to see this in the video. And then he said, I have to say that what you're saying I really find alarming. And then when that was pointed out, you tried to backpedal and say, yeah, well, we disagreed about that, but for the most part...
Well, I didn't backpedal on that.
Well, you're missing the part, Jack, you're missing the part when he was scoffing at, the thought of other Christians not agreeing with him, because he thought, his view was, so normal.
Yeah.
So are you guys going to allow any rebuttals?
Yeah, we don't really need you.
Wait, so I was wondering why she was bringing that up, because she was saying that in the chat, and I was like, why is she talking about this? Okay, that makes sense. Okay, there's a third thing, I guess. Well, this is sort of obvious, an obvious implication from this is sort of an obvious thing from things you guys said, right? But I guess the third thing, or third objection, right, is that God is giving up on his omniscience, right, if he has a false belief. So there is something metaphysical.
Oh yeah, now you're running with something that's not even, I didn't even provide an objection.
No. I kind of said the same thing. So what I was talking about
that's
is
disingenuous right there. You don't even allow rebuttal. You're just running with Tom's reason.
Can you not interrupt so much? We're trying to talk about you, John. Can you not interrupt so much? We're trying to talk about you. So Philip, I kind of had the same ideas, right? So I was making claims about the persons of the Trinity's beliefs with regards to things that are metaphysical. And then he just kept saying, yeah, it's not metaphysical. That's metaphysical. It's
metaphysical. You already cried about that. Now, are you ready for the response to your nonsense?
You're good.
Okay. So what I was saying, Philip, I guess, is with response to consideration, right, and belief. In Scripture, we see that they are not the same, in the sense that when we see Philippians 2, verse 6, it says, who being in the very nature God, right? So Jesus knew that he was God. He had a justified through belief that he was God, but did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. So we see here that as far as consideration, right, he made himself out to be the servant of all. He considered others better than himself, right? And so he became, and by doing so, that God, by humbling himself, even unto death, God exalted him to the highest place and gave him the name that is above all name. And so, in that sense, Jesus knew, in fact, he believed truthfully that he is of the same essence of God, and yet did not consider equality with God. And there's a distinction there.
Yeah, that's.
I just think that's purely performative, though. Then, right? Is that the idea? I'm just trying, because I don't know what you mean by consider it, unless you're saying something like that. It's some kind of purely performative, like it's almost like acting in a way that's not consistent with the belief. Is that the idea?
I don't know the term performative. I just know that
you don't know the term performative.
It's not like a belief. It's like when Jesus comes down as a servant, he considers about others better than himself. He washes the feet of his disciples. In other words, he lowers himself, and that's the consideration, even though he knows, meaning that he believes he's God incarnate.
Sounds like a performance.
Yeah. So here's the funny part, Philip, is that there's a point where he's going to deny this, but I have the recording and I'll get it. Where I said, Jack, I think Jack was even there for it. He was even there and he heard it live, right? I said, when Jesus washes the feet of the peasant, does he actually believe that he is below her and she is greater than him, Almighty God? And he said, yes.
Oh my God.
What was that again, Tom? What did you say?
Jack, were you there for that?
I think I was, yeah.
And what was the statement made?
Yeah, when I asked you, when Jesus washes the feet of a peasant,
okay,
and he thinks he has the consideration or the belief or the mindset, whatever you want to call it.
No, they're not synonymous.
I am less than you. You peasant are greater than me, right? Does he actually believe that? And you said yes.
No, he considers it. Well, are you saying that I said believe? I'm trying to make the distinction. You're the one trying to conflate the two, sir. You're the one trying to make them synonymous. And by doing so, you're the one trying to manufacture a contradiction that does not exist.
So, I mean, this is like a whole arc, Philip, and in his final like act of desperation, right? When all this like bullshit he's trying to peddle was just like falling flat, right? And he looks down and can see that he's already folded, right? He's in a folded state, looking around. He starts his rebuttal was just, oh, that's not scriptural. Like you're just trying to use philosophy. You got to use scripture. What's your scripture for this? What's your scripture?
That's right. You claim an internal critique, and yet you've interviewed nobody. You concocted it at 2 a.m. with your sycophants, and then you try to pretend.
Oh, I didn't need anybody else
somehow.
I came up with it myself.
You provide no biblical basis, and you always have to overtalk every time I make a point because you just can't stand to hear the truth.
No, I corrected something that was wrong. You were incorrect.
Okay. I really need to hear this video. Now wait, but there was a third objection, something about perfection? What was I wrong about that?
Well, perfection was a couple days ago or yesterday. You mean that one, or was there?
Yeah, that was yesterday.
I don't know.
You're talking about glory? Residual glory argument?
Glory was about 3, possibly 4 days.
Jack mentioned that one.
Yeah, the argument
He's been
about
losing his
perfection.
mind for about... Yeah, there's a point where Jack said, this is the worst that he's ever seen John Lee lose his mind.
Yeah, I got triggered because you guys muted me like 60 times, overtalked me. You had your sycophants come in and just start overtalking me every time I talk. I waited for you, and then someone cuts in. I waited for them to speak, and then as soon as I speak, you mute me and stuff like that over and over and over again. That's why I was mad, Tom. Not your lame arguments.
I think you'll come to a different conclusion that he was actually triggered by the argument.
The argument hits so hard for John.
But you know, the funny thing was that he was getting hammered for like 2 or 3 days on the
glory.
On the glory thing, on the glory argument. He was unhinged, you know, dealing with that one. And then it was like a 1-2 punch, you know, like, you know, he comes in this morning and Tom springs this on him, you know. He like practically went ballistic.
Yeah, I'm very content with my response, that's for sure. I didn't have to change any position. The only thing Tom has to do is just drown out and misrepresent his position and what people are saying. So whatever, Tom, go for it.
But I think Phyllis would like to understand your position. Like,
oh, sure, I'd like to, yeah. I mean, I explained part of it with the consideration of belief.
So, Phyllis, what didn't you understand about what he was saying?
Well, it sounded like he was trying to draw a distinction between consideration and belief. But every time he used the word consideration, it just sounds like belief.
Well,
and the only other interpretation was the performative thing.
You could interpret it performatively, right?
Yeah, well, as I said, the only other interpretation I can think of was the performative thing.
Yeah. So John, do you think you can clarify?
I mean, I don't know what performative means, Jack, but it seems to me that that's what's going on. So, in other words, consideration is understood performatively.
I think the idea would be something like, even though you know X is false, you behave as though it's true, or something like that. Do you see what I mean by that? It's kind of like, I mean, this might not be a perfect analogy, but it's like if a king, right, were to behave like a servant for one of his subjects, right, in full knowledge that he's actually the king, right, if he just sort of like started to behave as though he were the servant for one of his subjects, right, it would be a kind of performance.
He was kind of teaching us in the sense of what it is to serve, and by serving here on earth, you are great in the kingdom of God, and that's how come, you know, the lesser will be the higher, and all. And these things that seem contradictory and paradoxical, but they're coherent in the way that he's explaining.
So are you sort of do you think that I'm getting what you're getting at?
Yeah, I think it seems to me the word performative is accurate to what I'm trying to say.
Okay. So Phyllis, what do you think about that?
Well, I mean, one thing is that you need to square that with this recording Tom says he has about him saying that he does actually believe.
If we're charitable,
right,
we could just say,
well, I guess,
or he's revising his view, or whatever.
Sure. I guess then, but he's saying like the sacrificial thing is true.
Yeah, but that's the problem.
Creation.
It's like John Lee's watching a Civil War reenactment, and he watches like the South people like just, you know, get gunned down, fake, right? Fake killed, and then John Lee goes, "Wow, what an actual sacrifice," you know? It doesn't make any fucking sense.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, see, here's the thing, right? I mean, he's saying that yeah, well, what Tom said was right? I mean, presumably he wants to say that there was a sacrifice without creation, right? And then in the example you used, the example he agreed with, right, and he even, you know, showed the analog in the biblical case, right, was that, you know, the king performs, you know, acts as the subject, or behaves as the subject, even though he knows he's not the subject, right, or whatever. But, I mean, without creation, what's the point of the performance? Because he's saying that he's saying without creation, Jesus still considers that he's less than the Father or something like that,
I mean, he's that was already discussed too, and the contingency. He's not contingent upon creation.
I didn't even say the word contingent, but but do you understand what I'm saying, Jack? Are you still there, Jack?
Sorry, I had to step away for a minute. What? Can you repeat what you said?
Oh, I was just saying, even if we interpreted him, right, so say, he didn't just blatantly contradict himself about that thing, right? The point is, he wants to say that there was a sacrifice before creation or without creation, right?
Right. Oh, when
and
you
the point
say
is,
sacrifice, what do you mean? You're talking about the cross, or what are you talking?
I'm just talking about the fucking thing that you said, right? Where like there's sacrificial, there's something sacrificial sans creation.
Yeah, self-sacrificing love toward each other within the Trinity. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So the point is, right? If we interpret what's happening there, like he says, Jesus considers himself less than the Father, right? Well, if that's true, without creation, right? I mean, the whole point of the analogy you gave with the king and the
Tom. I never.
I can. Why am I being interrupted? So the example that you gave, Jack, right, was like the king.
I didn't say that.
That's just saying, Jack. Jesus. Anyways, right, the example you gave, right, was that like the king, behaves as the subject, even though he knows he's not the subject, right, or whatever. And then John May agreed with that, and he gave some biblical analogy, right, with Jesus coming down and doing blah blah blah, whatever. Now, the point is, without creation, what's the point of the? I mean, because if we're interpreting considering yourself lesser than the Father, Jesus considering himself less than the Father as a behavior, right? What's the point of the behavior in the the case without creation?
Right. The consideration, the example that we gave about that has to do with creation. If you want to understand it without sans creation, we can, but there's no need to say that the example with Jesus coming in flesh, considering himself a servant of all of creation, okay, that does not necessitate that that's the only way to understand agape love. We can consider it without creation, is what I'm saying.
Would you want to explain to Phyllis how you understand it works on sans creation, that the sacrifice that the persons are making to each? Okay, explain that.
Yeah. So as far as the consideration of each other in a loving way, it's considering the interests of the other, right? In a sense of above one's own self, in a sense, and so I mean, we could just start there. It's a sort of considering the interests of the others, like the father considering the interests of the son, and so forth.
What? But we're understanding consideration performatively here, so I have no idea what that means.
Are you using consideration in the same sense in the sans creation case as in as in the incarnation?
Well, I think John 17:3 comes to mind right now, where it says, "Father, glorify me as you glorified me before the creation of the world." Right. So we see in sans creation the Father glorifying the Son, right? And so that is a consideration. That's why all of these things tie in with glory, perfection, as well as agape love.
But is that a yes or a no to my question?
Did I miss a question, Jack?
My question was, are you using consideration in the same sense with respect to the persons of the Trinity sans creation as you are with respect to, the incarnated Jesus,
with the other people? With the creatures? Yes, I am.
Yeah, you are. Okay.
In the same sense, yes.
So what do you make of that? What do you make of that, Phyllis?
I don't understand. I mean, the point in the human people case was to teach them something, right? So I mean,
Yeah. So
God is
right. So I think what Phyllis is saying, John, is that you sort of like gave an explanation for the performance, for Jesus's performance as
Yeah,
a
but I didn't
lowly.
make it a teaching thing. That's what Philip inserted, and that was not the point. It was actually considering others are better than oneself, right? And
I
acting
see.
accordingly. Yes, it was a teaching thing, but that's not the point of it.
I see. Okay. But wait, Detroiter is.
Yeah, what do you think about that, Detroiter?
Wait, Detroiter, how much of this have you heard? Do you know about this? This new.
Very little.
I find it interesting you guys find it humorous. I mean, I don't know. I just find it difficult.
It's very humorous. It's extremely humorous. For sure.
Well, Detroiter, shall we just run through the basic outline for Detroiter just to get?
Wait, didn't I pitch it to Detroiter last night? Weren't you there, Detroiter?
Yeah.
Oh
Okay,
yeah,
well,
so you don't know how John responded to the argument. Is that right, Detroiter?
I think I have a little idea.
Because he was.
Look how excited Detroiter sounds. He's already like committed mentally that it's complete nonsense.
He said, Detroiter, he says that the three persons of the Trinity engaged in a sacrificial relationship amongst each other prior to creation. That's one part of it.
Right. And what is that consisting?
But then he also
What other sacrifices?
He also is saying that what the sacrifice is not something metaphysical, but performative. So the idea is that when Jesus makes a sacrifice by, even though he's actually God, right? He actually sort of enters the world as a lowly person, right? It's similar to a king behaving as a servant to one of his subjects, right? It's a kind of, so he's not really lesser than his subjects, right? He's still the king.
And it's not that he's
behaves,
believing he's lesser either.
right, he wants to distinguish it from belief. In other words, there's no false belief. It's not as though Jesus believes that he's less than mankind, but he behaves, you might say, as though he were not
a servant.
Yeah, as a servant. Yeah.
This is something that takes place sans creation?
Well, he says that this term consideration, which he's distinguishing from belief, right, which is this kind of performative notion, he's using it in the same sense prior to creation. He insists as after creation, as within creation, right? So somehow there's this kind of relationship existing amongst the persons of the Trinity and their relations with each other.
So what exactly is their sacrifice with each other?
Well, Jesus just thinks to the Father and considers himself less than the Father. And
without believing that he's less than the Father.
And I'll give you another example.
And the Father vice versa.
So what is he doing?
When we as believers offer a sacrifice of praise to God, right?
Detroit's reaction is so hilarious because there's like no sense in any of it, so you can't follow it, right?
You ever notice how you just overtalk every time I try to make a point?
Yeah, but you were getting in the way. We're trying to talk about you.
Well, actually, I was making a point in respect to how to understand sacrifice, because Detroit had a really good question, and it says trying to understand what's being sacrificed. That was his question. I was trying to answer him, but you interrupted me. So now he still does not know what they're sacrificing.
Yeah. I asked that question multiple times. What is sacrifice?
Well, every time I try to answer, Tom rounds it out for some triggered reason I don't know.
I do know the change in
literally,
the
he
mental
drowns
state.
out.
The change in the mental state. That's what they say.
No, but it's not a change of belief.
Well, which mental state?
Yeah, it's not a change in beliefs.
See,
The
and then you
beliefs-
guys start opining and just completely off base, and then you just like throw, it's like throwing the scent out, you know, like a red herring.
Oh, sorry,
Incredible, huh?
Detroit. I got that wrong. Jesus considers himself Lord
Yeah,
and God,
you don't want to let
but
me
he doesn't.
say, right? You want to
Yeah, because
misrepresent.
you know
Is
why,
that
John? Because it takes you like half an hour. Jesus considers himself below God, but he doesn't believe he's below God. That's the same.
Is him considering that a matter of some activity, or what is that considered?
It's just like a natural state of considering himself below God, but he doesn't believe he's below.
Wait, so is there an activity, John?
That was already discussed, Haiti. I don't know why you're even.
Wait, but John, wait, but John, is there an activity that the consideration consists in?
Yeah, so sans creation you're talking about, right, Jack?
Sans creation, yeah.
Yeah, there is an activity. It is a glorification, things like that. Then praise. I try to explain, right, what is being sacrificed in a sense, right? And when we give a sacrifice of praise, for example, Detroit, it is not the case that we are giving God anything. What does God need that we can give Him, right? So it's not the case that we are somehow sacrificing something we possess and then giving it to God in that sense. What it really is it's a magnification. Oh, magnify the Lord, how in a sense. So we're not making God bigger or greater because God is already great, right? And so it is a matter of perspective, and it's a matter of lowering our perspective and making God greater from our perspective, and that is what we're doing. That's the sacrifice that we do. We make ourselves less and God more. That's what we're giving up.
Do you understand that, Detroyer?
Well, if it needs to be saying something like, we make God appear greater to us by making ourselves lesser in relation or something like that. I don't know what relevance that has. So I guess I would wonder what exactly the persons are doing sans creation.
Yeah, the relevance it has is giving the interest of the other party, taking that into priority and consideration. And so one's actions are related to the interests of the other person. That is agape love, like a parent does for their children in that sense, and things like that.
So what are they doing sans creation in that regard?
So sans creation, what are they doing is within the Godhead, there are three persons. We believe in a Trinitarian God. There are three persons in the Trinity. And therefore, the consideration of the Father to the Son, Father to the Holy Spirit, the other way around, there is a sort of a relation, which is, I forgot the word I'm looking for, but it's relational in the sense that they are considering the interests of each other above their own.
Yeah, so what is that considering consistent? What are they doing?
They're like even glorifying, like it brought up John 17:3. I don't know if it went over your head the first time, but when Jesus says, "Father, glorify me," right before the foundations of the world. So what are they doing? The Father was glorifying Jesus and things like that.
But
right?
doesn't glorification require a belief, or no?
And so all of this ties into the discussion we've been having for the last 3 or 4 days now.
Well, because you're making a big distinction between consideration and belief, and so does glorification, which you equated to consideration, does that?
I mean, it's really unresolved.
What is that?
I mean, we already talked about the distinction. You still so confused
You
about
never
it?
answered it.
God's
No,
considering
it's
his.
different.
Hey, Jesus, I think maybe you're really great, and that's somehow glorifying him. But he's just considering. He's not actually coming to any conclusion. Is that right, John?
No, it's not considering like thinking about it. It's like I'm considering myself X, but I don't believe myself to be.
Yeah, like I consider myself. Right, I consider myself General Custard in this Civil War reenactment. That's the same.
I'll put it this way: the Father is equal to the Son, right? In essence, right? Metaphysically, right?
Yeah, that's nonsense. But all right, well,
And so
we're living that.
however, the Father considers, the interests of Christ, and therefore the Father's actions are dictated by the greater consideration, not from one's own self, but to the Son, and acts accordingly toward the glorification of His Son and other acts that represent a consideration for the Son.
So do
Just like a parent has for their own children.
do those acts of consideration require a belief?
Why do you keep introducing belief? I mean,
Well, because you're trying to separate them and trying to say that a consideration does not have a belief. But when you describe what a consideration is, all the actions that entail consideration,
I'm not going to address
they have
about that. I just won't answer your question.
What is involved in the Father glorifying the Son? What is that? Is that like him praising him or something? Or what is that?
Oh, glorification. Yeah, the glorification is like, that was a question. That was a question that began this whole thing. Why did God create us, right? And it was so man could glorify Him and enjoy Him forever, right? It's a compound answer. And so the question was, well, why does God need glory if He already has, according to Tom, maximum glory? And that's how the whole conversation began.
John,
and so it's not,
this isn't at all what he asked. He just asked you for the definition of glorification.
Right.
Well, specifically in
glorification representing some sort of praise, honor, things like the recognition, consideration, magnification. These are
so Son's creation, the Father was like praising the Son. That's one thing that happened.
That would be.
And that's
just like when He says on Transfiguration, "This is my Son." Listen to Him in a sense, and so right there, He's glorifying His Son there.
Right, and that is Him exhibiting agape love, Son's creation, by glorifying the Son.
No. That Transfiguration is post-creation, but that particular act, just like that, would be going on in eternity. Sure, Son's creation.
So in eternity, Son's creation, the Father is praising the Son, and vice versa, and also with the Holy Spirit.
That's correct. But it has more to do with just praise and glorification. But that's definitely part of it.
Right. So what if that praise is
interrelational, where one is viewing, not one's own interest, and in a loving way, a self-sacrificing way, the interests of others, and that's what Christ does for us.
Well, it's not really a self-sacrifice. I mean, it's not really a sacrifice. It's just praising Him, right?
I was really about to ask, what does this have to do with being sacrificial?
Because, you guys, He's lowering Himself to sacrifice. He's humbling Himself.
Right, and then so the work on the cross, right, is a demonstration.
It's after creation.
Yeah, we're talking about
right, and that it proves that act proves it. And it's not synonymous with it. It represents a proof of it.
Yes, no, we're talking about prior to creation. What's the sacrifice?
I already mentioned that 3 times.
They're lowering themselves mentally.
He used the phrase, "I consider me less than you," and this was consideration.
I didn't say that.
No, you said that absolutely. This is great. I'll get you on. I'm gonna nail you on this fucking too.
You say it so much so that you have other people repeating the nonsense.
You did say it, dude. You said it.
Well, Okay, but I'm trying to tie the glorification thing in with the self-sacrificing thing. That's what we're not understanding.
You're trying to understand what glorification represents and what I mean, in terms of us, the created being, right? When we glorify God, right, we are offering a sacrifice of praise, okay? We are honoring God. We are praising God. We are considering God greater than us. All of these things. This is how we are exhibiting our agape love, our God-given love. We cannot possibly do this unless God gives us this love. And because God has given us this love, we honor God in that way to glorify God. And so, in that case, we are the one actually self-sacrificing in love toward our Creator, even though God is greater than us. And already.
I don't understand why you answer a question that I'm clearly not asking. I'm asking about prior to creation.
Yes, and prior to creation, I already answered that actually 3 times with respect to consideration. Just as we consider as creation, sans creation, that consideration of the interests of the other party, of the magnification, and these types of things, right? The interests of, like the father having interest in the father having consideration for the interests of the son and glorifying the son, and those are the actions that represent what'd you say, self-sacrificial love in a relational way prior to creation.
Does that answer your question, Philip?
No. How is the glorification self-sacrificial? I don't understand.
Yeah, now it's not. Now it's like Jane with her belief thing. I mean, I don't know how many times.
You're not fucking answering me, John.
Why?
Maybe if you gave
tried. I mean, I'm not going to try again. So.
Well, maybe if you gave a definition of sacrificial praise.
No, see, but you ask him that, he starts talking about creatures and stuff, right? Which is clearly not what's being asked.
I didn't
specifically
mention creature sans creation, sir.
No, I know.
Oh my God.
We know you didn't. He didn't say you did. So I was just doing some quick Googling over sacrifice of praise, because I'd never heard the term. I wasn't raised religious. It sounds like from the Googling I did, I just wanted to see if you had a similar idea of what it meant.
This might be the worst attempt at apologetics I've ever heard in my life.
So you Googled sacrifice of praise. You're going to ask me a few questions, Jane? See if I...
Well, I just wanted to see what your definition of it was, because maybe I'm not understanding.
I also Googled it too, and the problem is it talks about people praying, not Holy Spirit, not the Father.
And it was specifically about people sacrificing. The sacrifice of it was praising when something bad.
Unbelievable. That's the example that I gave with respect to the question of why did God create man, so that we
so that's why I
God.
asked for your definition.
And then the reason I went there was that we are the sacrifice that we creatures do.
We don't need the story.
A person sacrificing lovingly toward God, giving God that consideration, right?
Right.
That's how it's understood. That's why I began there.
Yeah,
and then I took away the creatures, right? Took away the creatures and said, in this way, right?
Right, but in that way, John, everything I'm reading
between
everything I'm reading is that the way that it's meant with creatures is that they are meant to praise even when something bad has happened. That's the sacrifice, that they're through the terribleness. And I don't know how that would apply to the Trinity, because nothing bad is happening within the personhoods.
Sans
right?
What are you
creation.
talking about, James?
Sans creation.
When Christ is crucified, right? When he
Sans
knows he knew, right?
creation.
I'm talking about
Sans creation.
He always wants to talk about after creation. It's so hilarious.
Creation.
You guys are so triggered, all of you, okay?
Because you're
So
being
when
dishonest
Christ
as usual.
knows, when does Christ know that he's going to go to the cross? After
I don't want to
coming
talk about the
No.
cross. I want to talk
So in other
sans
words,
He
creation.
does. He does, though. He can only talk
I want
about
to talk
the
about sans creation. What's bad that's happening that we need
I'm
to praise
actually
each other
talking
through?
about sans creation. If you want to listen, okay? I don't know how many times I have to talk about sans creation, and
That's
you guys
the
aren't
entire
listening,
argument.
okay? I gave the example to when did Christ know? Sans creation, he knew. He knew that, and so in the midst of him laying his life down and the Father doing absolutely nothing, right, when he's in power to stop that evil to his Son, guess what's happening? Jesus is praising God. And so the example that you gave could be understood as Jesus praising God in the midst of that.
Right, but that was post-creation.
And that was the human Jesus.
Pre-creation, oh my goodness.
Pre-creation.
When did Jesus
You kept
know
saying in the
that he's
midst
going?
of that,
Before the
and by
creation
that
of the
I thought you
world,
meant
when did
crucifixion.
Jesus praise God? Before the creation of the world. Hello?
So you're saying that for an eternity, prior to creation, the non-embodied Jesus, the non-human Jesus, was all like, oh, boo-hoo, I'm going to be crucified one day when I'm a human.
Praise
gave a
the
shit.
Father. Praise the Father.
Hilarious.
Well, so if that
The non-embodied
let's
Jesus.
give him that.
So
Let's say
sad
that
about it.
Let's say that explains Jesus' sacrifice of praise. What explains the other two sacrifices to Jesus?
Jane.
I'm not even giving him that.
Wait a minute, Jane. Before you get to that, though, John's view is that you know where I'm going, right, Phyllis? John's view is that it's possible for God not to have created.
Right, I know.
And that means that at another possible world where there was no, where the divine intention to create was not ever actualized,
Yeah.
right? Was not ever put. Well, maybe I should say the desire to create was not ever, never rationalized the action to create, right? Where God existed alone at eternity. At that world, it's not the case that Jesus was sacrificed.
Right.
Right.
I can answer that too. Now, what Jane gave an example of in the midst of whatever, like sorrow or whatever she said, right? And I gave her an example of Jesus, right? But the issue is that it doesn't. That's an example of what we do or as creatures, right? But it's not It's not necessary.
Well, that's why I asked for your
agape
definition,
love,
and
right?
you refused to give it.
What'd you say? That's part and parcel of the definition of sacrifice of praise? Are you kidding me?
No, I said that's why I asked you for your definition, and you refused to give it to me.
What do you mean I refused to give it to you?
I asked,
You're supposed to
what
read
is
me
the
off a list,
definition
and then you read off
of
one, and I agreed
sacrificial
to
praise?
that, right? I gave you an example, sans creation, but it does not necessitate that. It's part of it,
Right,
sure.
so I'm asking for the definition, and you never gave it to me.
I did.
Okay, so what is it? Maybe I missed it.
Off the top of my head, I gave what? Honoring,
No.
right? That's still inclusive of your example, right?
Honoring is not
Magnifying
synonymous with
God,
sacrificial
all of these things,
praise.
right?
That's just any
Glorifying
kind of
God.
praise.
And so I've mentioned all of these things, right? And none of those things
What makes
was in the
honoring
midst of
that you're
some
talking
sort of
about
hardship.
sacrificial?
I don't know why you keep over talking me.
Well, because you're not answering my question.
I'll tell you what. Okay, I'll just not answer you.
See, this is part of the fun of all this, Phyllis, is watching like how annoyed John
How
gets.
triggered the atheists get when I start talking, where they can't even mute up and they just want to just bark back, and they're not even. And then they complain about not. They complain about not being explained something. Yeah.
Meta.
It's the meta. I don't want to hear it.
This is great. You bring me joy.
So, the sacrifice is someone praising God, but they don't feel like it. for whatever reason. That's the sacrifice. The funny thing is, we could have had a world with agape love and no evil, and we would have all
Oh
just
no,
been
that's
like,
not possible, Haiti.
Yeah, it's not possible because, although I don't understand the reasoning behind this, that because John thinks that if God decides to create, this is the only world he could have created.
Well, that's correct. Sir.
Yeah.
In virtue of what?
He could have created a world with agape love. He could have created a world with agape love and no evil. He just chose not to, right?
No.
So once again, you want to misrepresent me, and
Wait,
now you want to
let me
debate
represent
that.
your view. Let me
That's how
represent
ridiculous
your view.
this is.
Wait, let me represent your view, John, because I'm not going to strong.
Well, you already did steel man me, Jack, and did you see how she just utterly rejected?
Hold on.
And then she put that out there again.
Wait, stop.
That's cognitive dissonance.
John, he did have a choice, but once he chose, right, it had to be the way he chose. He did have a choice.
He had a choice to create or not create.
Yeah.
But if what John is saying that given his choice to create, necessarily he created a world in which, whatever it was he said, that there was.
Yeah, and that wasn't to express his agape love, John.
Did you even understand what Jack said?
Yeah, I did.
So
I'm
why
asking you
do
now.
you have questions? Why don't you ask Jack? He knows my position.
Because what would be the reason he had to create it a certain way, if not to express his savior mode, which is just another way of saying agape love.
Are you trying to have
agape
me
love
take Matt's position in this debate with Tom? Is that where we're going?
So you have a different position to Matt then? Is that what? Maybe I'm.
I don't agree with. I don't agree. Even though I believe Matt totally slaughtered Tom in that debate.
Oh, with a false
argument. With his position.
With a false argument, then, because you don't think he's right, do you?
He just holds a little bit of a different view.
So just to be clear,
in the case of agape love and all
you don't agree.
But it's not that big of a
with
difference.
Matt's position, you think it's unbiblical. That's great. And so he won the debate with an unbiblical position. Is that what you said?
I think he called it disturbing.
Oh, no. I didn't say unbiblical. I said from his perspective. He still won the debate.
That's funny because I thought you said you agreed with Matt yesterday.
And if you're listening carefully to what was said, yes, I agree with those points. You're trying to go back to and then try to insert things, any and all things, and say, but you said you agreed with Matt.
Look,
did you even listen to exactly what I was agreeing with?
Great. Do you agree with Matt's view that God had to permit evil in order to express agape love? You don't agree with that, right?
I don't necessarily think Matt holds that view.
I just said it 2 minutes ago, and you said I don't agree.
No, what you said was I don't think necessarily that what you just outlined. I don't think Matt held that view in the debate. I don't think that he holds that view now.
Okay. So what was it that you don't agree with Matt on? That you just said we have a different view about?
With Matt's view is about agape love, right?
Yeah.
In response to what Tom was saying. See, my answer to the problem of evil does not involve agape love, right? And yet Matt has certain views about agape love that I definitely agree. Listen, you're not even listening. How about I with you two?
You're not going to say it, are you? You're just going to say with respect to his...
Took a while today, Jack. Unbelievable. You overtalked me, you're on the list.
Because you don't answer questions.
Yeah, I don't really care.
I'm asking you a
I think I'm not answering your question. I'm literally answering your question. And you can fully respond afterwards and ask it again. And how I didn't answer your question. That's fine too. But if you're going to cut me off, I'm just not going to answer your question.
Because you don't answer the question, you answer a different question. And then when someone says, hey, wait a minute, you're not answering, then it's your excuse to pull the ejector button and say, right, I won't talk to you about it then. Last chance. What is Matt's view that you disagree with regard to agape love? What is the view? And I don't want to hear a story. Just tell me what the difference is.
The ship's already sailed, sister.
Yeah, because you weren't going to tell me.
Wait, but he said that that Matt's view is that agape love is what explains both the creation and evil, and John is saying that in his view it doesn't.
Right.
Is that right, John?
That is correct.
What does it mean to explain creation?
In other words, that God created as an expression of his agape love. That's Matt's view, right, John?
Yeah, but it's tied into evil exists because of his agape love, that kind of a thing.
No, I left that part out, but the point is that creation is explained by the fact that God is agape love, and the creation is an expression of that.
Oh yeah,
that's literally what I just said.
Now Matt would hold to that position,
I
and I also hold to that position. But your statement has no relation whatsoever to do with any problem of evil.
God needed to create to express his agape love. Do we all agree with that?
But John, that's not
Matt's
John's
view. No, but do we all agree that's Matt's view?
I think John is saying that is Matt's view.
I thought Matt would say
right?
they express agape love between the three. Or is that not
No,
right?
he meant so God could express it to the people and they could express it to each other.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah. And the thing is,
Matt and I would both hold to the position that God created the world to express his love, right?
Great.
God
The
sent
thing
his Son
is,
to express his love as well.
right. So here's the entailment. You can't express that kind of love without evil. And that is according to Matt.
Yeah, that's right.
So what the fuck? I said God permits evil so he can express his agape love.
Yeah, but not on John's view.
No, on Matt's view.
John's view is that God
Talking about Matt's
God
view.
creates the world for... Yeah, you're right about Matt.
Okay, then how come John said I was wrong?
What did you say Haiti was wrong about?
You were asking, do I agree with position? Now you also, as far as Matt's view, from my understanding, you didn't
His
represent...
brain's turning to soup.
She asked you like 4 times about Matt's.
He needs like a notepad and pen.
He keeps saying he either agrees with it, but he also disagrees with it.
Well, he agrees with some aspects of
See
Matt's
how you
view.
say I agree with it, but I disagree with it, as if you're talking about the same thing.
Right.
He's saying he agrees with some aspects and disagrees with others. Is that right, John?
Yeah, I just got muted again by someone who's triggered.
He agrees with the claim, he disagrees with the entailment. That's the problem.
No, he doesn't agree. He agrees with some claims that Matt would make, but not others.
Yeah.
Is that right, John?
That is extremely accurate, Jack. That's what I was trying to get
that's
Haiti to
really...
understand.
Thank you, Jack.
He agrees with something Matt says and not others. Great.
So wait, do you want to specify? We know that you don't agree with the part about how the creation and evil are explained by God's
agape love, right?
Agape love.
I don't agree.
But
with
what
that.
are the parts? What are the parts that you do agree with?
I agree that God created the world to express his agape love. That much I agree.
Oh, you do agree with that?
Yeah, but he doesn't. Do you agree that you can't express agape love without a fallen world?
No, I don't agree with that.
Right. So that's the part you disagree with Matt about, because Matt has said you need evil to express agape love. Because Matt thinks agape love is all about self-sacrifice.
That's got an interesting consequence then, because that means that he thinks the creation is necessary. So did you ask him about that? Because that's like
that's what I said last night.
Yeah, he does.
And wait, you spoke about it with Matt though?
No. That's what I was.
You were saying that's what he would.
Yeah, God has no choice to create.
Right, he has to create, which seems like a violation of his deity.
Now the point is this, Tom. Had you been on your game, and Matt said that, you could have just pounced on it and went for the jugular. But you're so inept, you didn't even.
Look how triggered he is! Oh my God!
And this is more.
Look at it worded edgeways.
You know how triggered he is, man.
Okay, so I just want to know if being a savior is also a way of expressing your agape love.
That's for you, John.
That's got to be a yes.
I would have thought so.
He's just never mentioned it so far.
Well, because perhaps their views aren't that far apart. John thinks creation is so God can save people, and Matt thinks it's so he can express his agape love.
You're not going to answer that one, John.
Problem is that if John also thinks that you don't need evil to express agape love, then
The difference is it's a very subtle difference.
Why'd you
But
interrupt
the
her?
difference is
that's
that
okay.
the difference is that in order for a savior, you do need evil. In order for God to love, you don't need evil. That's the subtle difference.
Right. Yeah, I just don't know how you don't need evil for agape love. Under Matt's view, it's very clear, you know, you have to go through sort of hardship to sacrifice for people you love. You have to give things up for people you love, but I don't know.
But that's going to be a big problem for Matt, as John John astutely points out to Tom that Matt is going to have to explain. Matt is going to have to explain how God was free, how the creation was a free act.
Now, the reason why Matt slipped out of that was because Matt was saying, Tom said it was not logical. Matt said he acquiesced that it was logical, but what Matt said was that agape love is also logical, which actually it's not. But he says it's also logical. Not only so, it's superior. And then Tom failed to respond to that. And then
I mean, that portion of the debate, the time ran out. I was literally stopped. I was literally stopped from questioning
you're
him
over
about
talking me. Thank you very much.
So I asked Matt about this in the back channel last night. I said, did you say agape love wasn't self-sacrifice? And Matt said, no, I just said it wasn't the only property of agape love. So I asked him, well, is self-sacrifice a necessary property of agape love? And he didn't answer. Because I think he was like,
scared. I'm scared.
Yeah.
What's all connecting agape love to?
Well, Matt Adams, who's not here, thinks that agape love is the reason for creation, and also that it seems to be that you require evil. That's why God permitted evil, so agape love could be expressed. But now I think he might be walking that back, but then he's just blown up his own argument.
I think it's. I mean, whether you realize it or not, Tom, I told you at the time what problem with Matt's position was, right, and how you failed to capitalize.
Bro, I literally ran out of time, dude. I mean, it was a timed debate, bro.
Unbelievable excuse. He said to you it was logical and superior, and you just had your little bunny tail between your legs.
I thought that wasn't his argument, John.
Actually, as I recall, it was.
Really? Because you agreed with me last night that it wasn't.
No, he agreed that Tom's position was logical, but Matt, from my recollection, Matt said this is also logical, and
What's this?
not only so, it's superior, is what he said.
What's this?
Because it includes agape love.
Oh, that's funny, because I said that last night, and you said that wasn't his argument.
Oh. You said something completely different last night. I'm not even going to go.
I said his argument was agape love requires evil to be expressed. Therefore, God permits evil. Therefore, there's no problem of evil because this is the best of all possible worlds. Because it has agape love in it. I said that was his argument. Now, do you think he had a different argument?
Yeah, I'm not even going to respond. To be honest, I didn't even hear you.
Great.
I'm just saying I tuned you out. I really.
Great.
Extremely triggered.
Can I just get clarification on this agape love argument?
I just literally laid it out. We know.
Are you? Hold on a second. Are you a Christian?
He just came.
Are you a Christian? Because if you want to stay a Christian, you don't want to hear the agape love argument.
I mean, I am Christian,
Tom?
but at the same time, if we're talking about agape love and the love the way that Jesus did, then that was just extending to love to even the criminals and everybody else too. So, like, you know.
But I'll try to give you the nutshell version. Do you think that agape love is the highest form of love?
I mean, I wouldn't say it's not the highest form of love. I think agape love, unconditional love for humanity in general. So yeah,
You think an unconditional love might not be the highest form of love? You think maybe a conditional love would be above that? Well, come on, man. What are you doing?
Say yes. We haven't got time for this.
No, I only care if he really believes that. So far, you're telling me you're a Christian. Like these aren't hard questions to answer, bro.
Just looking for rakes. Stop looking for rakes.
Maybe he thinks you're trying to trick him, Tom.
Well, it is a difficult problem, right? But I mean, the answers are the truth is the truth.
I think that unconditional love is the highest form of love. Correct.
Okay, cool. Yeah, me too. So
I think Jesus said, greater love than this that a man had.
Can you hold on, Stanley?
Stanley.
We're trying to talk to Christian.
So anyway, God is loving. God possesses all attributes to the fullest extent. He is not lacking in any of his attributes. One of them is love, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, yeah, that's the easy one. Another easy one. So Jesus died on the cross, and that self-sacrifice, that unconditional love, unconditional even for his own self, was agape love. Do you think that agape love necessitates self-sacrifice? Or can you have agape love with just like, lending someone a tenner or something like that?
I mean, those are two relatively different examples, but if you're speaking into Christianity and Jesus as agape love being self-sacrifice, I do believe that at times, yes, in order to express love, there is sacrifice.
Well, just keep in mind, if you don't think that agape love needs sacrifice, then there was no reason for Jesus to die on the cross. Is that something yet you want to say?
I would say that Jesus died on the cross for our sins, not so much.
But he didn't need to? Is that what you want to say?
No, that's not what I'm saying at all. Are you trying to lead me down a path and put words in my mouth, Tom?
No. I want to know exactly what you think. If you don't think that agape love needs sacrifice, then so be it. This argument doesn't apply to you, right? But I want to be very clear about what I'm saying, what my terms mean, and what you think, right? So I'm just saying that if you're going to say that the agape love doesn't entail self-sacrifice, then I'll just send you on your way, and then Jesus didn't need to die on the cross for agape love, right? But he did, right? So that's fine. But in order to play the game, right, you're going to need to put a piece on the board.
Am I not standing here being vulnerable, authentically sharing? Is that?
Oh my God!
Damn, Haiti, you are just interjecting. Are you on the one today? Do you need to take a break?
Look, man, I'm just gonna be straight up with you, man. Like, if you just answer the questions and be like, yeah, I have to think about that or whatever, it's not gonna be a big deal. No one's gonna. I don't really care. This argument was really
vulnerable, right?
This argument was like made to like talk to John Lee. We've done that. You're just someone who wanders into the room.
I thought it was for Matt.
Nothing's gonna really happen. So I'll just, I'll tell you what. I'll just give you the benefit of the doubt. I'll just like leave that as an open question, and we'll just talk about the entailment. So, if it is the case that you think that agape love needs a self-sacrifice, well then,
since God, as we already talked about, has love to, as well as any attribute to its maximum extent, and it's not lacking in any attribute, well, then he has loving to its maximal extent, right? Now loving before creation, right? If he had agape love, right, unconditional love, the greatest type of love, which the greatest being conceivable would have, he would have agape love. Now, before there was creation, what was the self-sacrifice for that would make or enable God's agape love?
Because other people were engaging in different types of love.
No, there's no other people. There's no other people.
Well, you're asking about why he sent Jesus down to die for our sins and why there was
No. We're talking about before creation. I want to be very clear. I'm talking about before creation. Before creation, there's just God, the Trinity, Jesus, the Father, the Holy Spirit, just chilling. Because there's no creation yet.
So, if there's no creation yet, then that means there's no Jesus yet, because there's only God.
Oh,
no, there's no incarnation of Jesus. Jesus still exists, right? He's just not a dual-natured Jesus avatar that walks the earth, right?
I mean, you're a Trinitarian, right?
Yeah, confirm.
You're a Trinitarian, right, Chris?
I do believe in the Holy Trinity, yes. However, I don't think that Jesus, if we're talking about before creation...
Call him the Son, then. Call him the Son. Is that okay? So there was the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Yes?
Correct.
Great.
After creation, when Jesus came and walked amongst men and took on a human body, right? That was after creation.
Exactly,
right?
which is why I'm saying that, to say that Jesus, that's after creation. So before creation, there was no Jesus, is what I'm saying.
No, okay, okay, that might be. I understand what you're saying. There is no like Jesus before and after creation in that sense. I mean, like the Jesus that we know, the Jesus that was Jesus before creation did not have a human body, etc. Right?
Okay, so then yes, in that light, then you could just call him God.
No, call him the Son.
Call him the Son, right?
Yeah.
No, the Son implies creation, Haiti. We're not doing before.
What? No. The Trinity is eternal. The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit were there from eternal times.
Weird,
right?
man. This is weird.
Are you saying there was no Trinity prior to creation?
Uh-oh.
He's a biotarian.
Uh-oh.
Oh, God.
Oh, man.
What a waste of time.
Anyways, look, dude, I'll just be nice about it. Like, right, so if it is the case that you don't think that there is a Trinity prior to creation, it's a very unorthodox view shared by no Christian that I've ever met. But whatever. So the argument is just going to be for those who do think that there is a Trinity before creation, and all the persons of the Trinity possess the quality of love to its greatest extent, how was that possible without a self-sacrifice?
Even if it's not a Trinity, it actually becomes worse, right? Because how is that one God or one person exhibiting self-sacrifice?
Still the Holy Ghost.
He's considering his own interests and glorifying himself.
Also, he's a spiritual New Age.
Oh, so I don't know how was he asking about this?
You have a response or no?
Christy.
Is he gone?
No, he's still there. Just clammed up.
Well, whatever, dude. So that's the argument. You wanted to know, I gave it to you.
Yeah.
Right?
I like this one.
Should have seen what I did to John Lee this morning, Jeff.
Video is going to be amazing.
He was folded within minutes, but originally he didn't have pleats, but he was folded with pleats, additional folds.
With pleats.
It happened so fast he kind of panicked.
I think the rebuttal that he tried to forward is perhaps one of the worst rebuttals I've ever heard in my life.
Well, he had to think of it on the spot, though. I thought it was clever.
That is true. That is true. Yeah, he did have to think of it on the spot.
There's one thing that's worse, though, than John Lee's justification.
Actually, I didn't think of it on the spot. I had several scriptures, at least 10 different scriptures. I'm just saying.
He's still triggered. It's so hilarious. But there's something that was even worse than John Lee, which I know it might be hard to believe if you think that's one of the worst. It was Darth Dawkins' justification for the first premise.
Yeah, that was great.
That was just, it was just laughable.
Exquisite.
I was listening. He actually thinks, you can tell that, I think that he actually thinks it makes sense in his head.
Well, there was one great line that, because I didn't hear the whole thing yet, but what I heard was just unbelievable. But then Josh posted this one great line. The factness of facts is revelatory of God. I mean, that you just can't make this stuff up. It's just magical. The factness of facts is revelatory of God.
Yeah, you know what? I think some weapons are like too dangerous to even wield. I think the agape love argument should be put away. It's it might be too powerful, right? And I don't even know if we can really understand the implications of the argument becoming unleashed upon the world. I'm
trying to think of a sci-fi reference for this. Let's see.
Well, it's causing John a lot of real life problems.
Family stance, I guess.
Yeah, it's that one that she's doing the tour of all the weapons in Odin's chamber or whatever.
Agape love is not a difficult to understand. Glory, admittedly, is a little bit harder. Glory is a little bit harder.
You don't even fucking understand it, bro.
You provided zero scriptural basis, pretending it's an internal critique. I gave you about 10 verses. On the spot.
Scripture.
Yeah. You think I went to the internet? You think I went to go to Christians or questions and Google this stuff? No.
Scripture. Oh, scripture.
And then once I provided it to you, you don't even want to accept it. You want to. You still. It's like you don't even hear what you're. You don't even listen to what's being said, and then you want to argue. Oh, you have to be given up something. Self-sacrifice cannot exist as creation.